you know, in many of my classes and courses, what I've tried to teach on is the idea of catastrophism, that there is in any system, in any unified or sort of, let's say, a linear system, a gradualistic system, there are natural points of interruption, which you might think of as nodal points. And those nodal points are basically what dominates the progression of the evolution of any system. Really, if you look at the evidence, you begin to realize that it's the catastrophes that have really been the major shapers of the history of the planet. Going back to the late Ordovician, there's all of these really interesting, cool marine creatures, you know, just abundant in the rocks. Then all of a sudden they're gone, right? What happened? Right? And they're looking in various places around the planet, finding the same thing. Then late Devonian, same thing. You know, Permian Triassic, same thing. Perhaps 90 to 95% of all marine creatures at the end of the Permian period went extinct. And then you had the Triassic Jurassic boundary, same thing. Then the Cretaceous Tertiary. So these were the great five in Earth history. What are the causes of this? What is driving these sudden decimation of you know, huge numbers of species, right? And leaving these impoverished biosphere, an impoverished biosphere that then might take tens of thousands of years before it actually begins to recover. With the KT, the Cretaceous Tertiary, which is now dated to around 66 million years ago, we've got the evidence of a great asteroid impact. There was one of the huge volcanic outpourings of highly acidic lavas or magmas occurred.
Yo, Gyges, what's up, man?
As well. The Deccan
What's
traps
up,
of
dude?
India.
Thanks, man.
If we go back to 241 million years
Thanks, buddy.
ago, we
Appreciate that,
find
man.
the
That's nice of you.
Siberian traps.
The European special. Actually, it's only like midday in Europe right now. It's only like 12 o'clock.
Again, we find the same thing. We find the Central Atlantic magmatic province that now can be found, remnants of it flanking both sides of the Atlantic Ocean.
Let's get it, yo. Thanks, man. Yeah.
We also find
I know. I want it.
Iridium.
I want the time.
Osmium as well. These are elements that are abundant
I want to improve.
in asteroids and meteorites, but rare
I want to get better.
Rocky crust of the Earth. This was the first clue that led the geologists to the realization that there had been an extraterrestrial impact.
My stick is really wearing down. When I started this grind on this controller maybe a year ago, not started this grind, when I started on this controller, this stick was a 10 out of 10. Now it's a 6 out of 10. I have. Oh, thanks, man. Thanks, buddy.
It may be that the
Thanks, man. I appreciate that, dude.
In one fell
It's
swoop.
really nice.
There may have
That
been
means a
several
lot.
smaller impacts before
Someone
the great
said,
impact.
Good.
Then that
Gotta enjoy the
great
process.
impact,
Yeah,
though,
thanks,
was
man.
utterly devastating
Yeah, oh,
to the
gotta enjoy the process, exactly.
Well, so now the question
Time
is,
is just,
we go
dude,
back and we look at the
this
other great
is
five and we see that
so wise.
we've got evidence both of extraterrestrial
You're like
impact and
my
huge
Jedi master.
volcanism happening simultaneously. And I think it's very probable, and it's been suggested.
Well
this is
said,
an
man.
original idea with
Time
me,
is just a
that
bonus.
The
Wow.
volcanism may be
You're
a
changing
result,
my
maybe
whole
a
outlook on
consequence of the
speed
impact.
running on life.
What we now know
Hold on a second. I
about
need to get
total number of species that goes back to the Cambrian explosion down to now, somewhere around 99.99% of them have gone extinct. And of that 99.9%, virtually all of them have gone extinct.
I'm too lucid
as a
too. I
result
need
of natural
to
causes
get
and the vast
less
majority
lucid.
in catastrophic events. Well, now it appears that this similar, not on
Is
the
that a
same
little
scale
wizard?
or magnitude, but a similar type
That's
of
cool.
event happened around 12,000 to 13,000 years.
What's up, Scott? This process is enjoyable.
New evidence from a black matte site in the northern Andes supporting a cosmic
It's all just
impact
clickbait.
12,800.
I'm actually never gonna get this
Discovery of
time.
a nano
No, I'm joking.
diamond-rich layer in the Greenland ice sheet. Shock synthesized hexagonal diamonds.
It's literally
Younger,
just
driest
all my
mountains that
clickbait.
very high temperature impact melt products as evidence for cosmic airburst impacts.
You know what would be clickbait if I go for the
Wildfire and abrupt
guard,
ecosystem disruption
shoot the
on
guard in the leg
California's
on
Border
00.
Channel Islands.
That would be
At
fucking
the
clickbait.
Alarod Younger Dryas boundary, nanodiamond-rich layer across 3 continents, consistent
The Ace
with
strat.
major cosmic impact of 12,800.
What makes it so crazy with Ace's run is that he had no health.
Evidence
That was
from
the main
Central
issue.
Mexico supporting the Younger Dryas
I need a lot of health
extraterrestrial impact
still.
hypothesis.
What?
Evidence from northwestern Venezuelan Andes for extraterrestrial impact. The black mat enigma. It's black. The reason it's black is because it's so loaded with salt, which suggests wildfires,
shit.
perhaps on a global or at least a hemispheric scale, that preceded
We're
the
warming up.
tremendous
What's up,
flooding
Scotty?
that followed in its wake. Now,
Thanks, guys.
shock synthesized
Legends.
hexagonal diamonds
Appreciate that,
only
guys.
occur. There's no known natural process that will produce them, except for the intense
Too
heat
lucid,
and
though.
pressures of a
I
cosmic
shaved to brush my teeth. Guys, Goldeneye is making me the most degenerate guy.
evidence of impact material and the extinction of the megafauna 12,000
Yo, just working nice.
years ago. The impact
I'm
material
trying to
contains
get
iron
to that level.
oxide
Trying to get
spherules
job.
in a glassy iron silica matrix, which is one indicator of a possible meteorite impact. Chemical analysis.
My car needs
of
new
these
brake lines. I
spherules in the
told.
glassy matrices found
Pretty sure
in
we
the
talked.
particles
Yeah,
from
I
the
think we talked
larger
about that
size
before.
fractions.
I mentioned it in chat before. I can't remember if I
Compared
said
to
it
the
to you, Scotty.
carbonaceous chondrites,
Yeah, my
which
Uber
is
Eats
one
car
of the
needs new
classes
brake
of
lines. Yeah,
meteorites.
I know. It's
They're
okay.
also compared to impact material associated with meteorite
It was a
showers
patch
and
on my
meteorite
life.
craters and tectites. The iron oxide
So I don't know what to do yet. I was planning
has an
to drive a city
unusually high
bus to
silicon
pay for my
concentration
repairs.
consistent with
Then
the
I
chemistry
didn't
of impact
make the
material
city bus
from meteorite
bar.
showers. They go on to say that the presence
Yeah.
of shock
So
synthesized hexagonal and other nanometer-sized diamonds in Younger Dryas
why I'm
boundary
playing
sediments in association with soot and other wildfire
it is kind of like
indicators
living the dream, though.
is consistent
This is kind of my dream.
cosmic impact event of 12.9 Ka. And the
Oh,
hypothesis
yo,
that
well
the Earth
said, man.
crossed
That's exact. Yeah, I got a Honda too. I told you, right? I have an RSX, Acura RSX. Yeah, the engine's great. K20A3. The SI engine. I think we talked about it. I'm pretty sure we talked about that. Yeah, nice. Yeah, we did. Nice, man. Yeah, exactly.
13,000 years ago to
The engine's good.
25,000
K22.
More
What?
than half of the North American continent was
You have the
prepared
Type R?
and
Get
provides
out of
bigger
here.
than the
What?
one
You have the
that is
A2.
now covered the South.
What?
If you're going to add
That's
6
awesome,
million,
man.
7 million cubic miles
Hell yeah,
of
dude.
ice
Legend. That's awesome.
to the surface of the Earth, where's the water
That's
come
like a
from that
classic now,
forms
man.
those glaciers? From the oceans, right? Well, if you take that much water out of the global ocean, sea level's going to lower. So during the late glacial maximum,
Mine is fake
sea
VTech.
levels were at least
The VTech
400
kicks
feet
in
lower
at
than they are now.
lower RPMs.
This is a
Maybe
Greenland
4,000,
ice core study
3,000,
which shows the
4,000?
extreme climate changes at the end of the
It's not the true
Pleistocene
VTech.
Holocene transition. And you see that dashed line.
This stick is really shit
That
now.
is the present temperature. The present is all the way to the right of that graph.
It's too
If
bad.
you look at the bottom, you see it says YD, that's for Younger Dryas, and then you see a scale
I gotta get higher.
line at the bottom, 0 over on the right, and you see 10,000, and then you see, what is it there, 12,800 being the time of the Younger Dryas boundary. And you see that there's that gray band. That was the Younger Dryas
Yeah, exactly. You
boundary,
used
and
the
you
word,
see-
right
look what
word
the
there,
graph is
bulletproof.
doing there. Look at how it
For the
peaks.
engine.
This enormous
Why?
peak there that actually dates to about 14,600. And then the climate just plunges down. Okay, and
Hell
then you
yeah,
see
man.
warming at the end of the Younger Dryas, and that was a spasm of warming.
Yeah, mine's a
That is about
2002 clutch
11,600.
drive
Now,
alternate.
you
Dang.
have
Oh my god.
what you had there
Calipers?
was
No
two
way.
gigantic pulses of
Air
meltwater
con
into the
condenser,
global oceans,
shocks.
which
Oh my
caused what
god.
John Shaw in
Roll
his column
bars?
referred to CRE,
What?
catastrophic rise of
On the
events.
last 2 years, I hear you.
And
The
I believe
clutch.
that these
drive
events, these
shaft.
warming events are associated with the gigantic
Shocks,
floods
yeah. Springs.
because it was these warming events that melted the ice. If we go to the next slide,
Jesus, dude.
you'll see that the next slide is a late Pleistocene mortality graph.
That's
Now,
Sounds really
In these
dangerous.
events that terminated the Ice Age, roughly half the great megafaunal
Rotted,
species on
yeah,
Earth
exactly. My
died
car's
out
literally rotting
very
away.
rapidly. What we have here is you look at this graph. from
Rot
left
is
to
the right
On
word.
the far left, it's 50,000 years ago. And then it ends at 4,000 years ago over on the right.
No, I'm too lucid, guys. I need to
But
get a
now
little
if you look
higher.
at
I'm
each
playing
one of
really
those
terribly right
squares
now.
represents a fossil specimen. For tens of thousands of years, from 50,000 years ago to about 14,000 years ago, you'll see that it's generally fairly sporadic. And you get to
I think it's the
14,000,
stick, to be absolutely honest
and
with
it
you.
really peaks around 12,000 years. All of a sudden, around 12,000 to 13,000 years ago, a huge number of fossil remains were
Hold on.
introduced into the environment. And so and then at the end of this, these species are extinct. They don't exist anymore. Like it says here, each square represents a fossil specimen of an extinct megafaunal species. Mastodons, mammoths, giant ground sloths, dire wolves, Pleistocene lions, saber-toothed cats, giant elk, giant beaver, giant armadillos. Everything was giant. So this shows a precise correlation between the mass extinction episode and the graph we just looked at. If we were to flip this graph over, that spike would coincide with that younger Dryas drop.
Rotted.
Okay, so now
Sub
this
40, some
is
42.
a graph of sea level rise at the end of the last ice age. And what this
You know, that's
graph
my
does
PB,
is shows you
right?
there
So
were two
that's
huge
the
spikes of meltwater
that's
into
the
global ocean.
I don't want to
You
lie.
have the first one on
So what if
the
I get
right,
one?
the
What if I
power
put sub
was
140 and get like
called meltwater
141 or
pulse 1A.
something?
Now the dating of that is
That would
around
just be really
14,000
painful.
years. Okay, then you see that that's followed by a rapid
Alright, makes sense. No worries, dude. Yeah,
in the
not no worries,
volume
but I
of
mean, yeah,
water
I don't know.
flowing into the oceans. Which is
Oh,
gonna be
this
a
is
direct
brand new. I
function
didn't
of
even
how rapid the ice is
I didn't even do it yesterday.
Now,
Whoops.
that trough there is followed by a
Whoopsie
second
daisy. I
spike.
passed out. Passed
And
out really
that
early.
trough
Then I woke up early.
of
Now
reduced
we're here.
flow to the ocean exactly coincides.
Yeah, fair.
So in other words, when the world went cold again during the younger Dryas, the water, the meltwater flowing from the glaciers into the oceans declined if it didn't stop altogether. And then about 1,300 years later, boom, it started up again. And that gave us meltwater pulse 1b. So these three graphs are really interesting to correlate because what you see is that first big warming spike that we looked at in the first graph coincides with meltwater pulse 1a. Then the younger Dryas of the planet jerking back into full glacial cold corresponds with the trough where the meltwater stopped. And then the second warming coincides with the lower spike, which is meltwater pulse 1b. And right in the middle where that trough is, hey, between those
07?
two spikes is when all the
A4. Oh, no way.
one would think, okay, if you've got 15,000 cubic kilometers of
I didn't know
water
A4 exists.
being dumped into an ocean in 1 year, or maybe even quicker, that means a whole lot of ice is melting.
What
really fast.
RPM does the
That ice
VTEC
melting
kick in,
has
do you know?
to create giant
If it's a
floods.
type R, it must kick in really high.
This is a bar, a gravel bar, but in this case it's a boulder bar. Now, if you've ever done any walking along a river,
Yeah, man, the used car market is just so shit right now,
along the
dude.
beach, and you've seen ripples in the sand,
Balance or
typically-
shaft.
you know, if you've got
Interesting.
water that's a foot or 2 feet deep, you'll have ripples that are maybe an inch or two high. What we're looking at here is a flood bar that's 3 miles long. It's up.
Yeah,
to
man, I got
250
quoted
feet
for
above
the
bottom.
work.
And the ripples.
So the
that you can
parts,
see
I got
are
quoted for the
up to
parts and the
50
work
feet
at $1,700. The guy said it would take him all day.
This was produced again by Gyges.
It's way too high for the labor. It's like 8 hours of labor for
It's a
some
three-story.
brake lines. It's too long. So that's why I've been thinking about it for a week or two. I took it from another mechanic. They
already
didn't even
know
quote me.
From high water marks that the water over this was at least 800 feet
Parts
deep
I see you
at
can
one
get
time.
like all new brake lines for like
It's
$400,
features like
$500
this
bucks.
that are just
But
unequivocal.
I've never worked
terms
under
of
the car. I
realizing that
replaced
this
the
really
master cylinder, the brake master cylinder, because I was thinking maybe it was leaking.
One
but
of these current ripple
110 miles
fields was
yesterday.
in a
Yesterday?
place called
Holy
Camp's
shit.
Prairie.
That's so far.
And Camas Prairie is near Flathead Lake. It's right to the west of Flathead
What were you
Lake.
doing yesterday, man?
And in Camas Prairie,
That's so freaking
there's this
far.
massive ripple train. The total ripple train itself is almost 5 miles long. Where the
What is
current ripples
this?
are the biggest
Why?
at the north end, the amplitude ranges between about 30 and 50 feet. The wavelength varies anywhere between 200 up to a maximum I
Mixed
think, of
roads and
about
cheese.
500 feet.
Wow, that's insanely good. Oh, no way.
This is from western Montana. You know, it says
That sucks.
in Genesis
Whatever.
7:19, the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth and all the high.
I went to a job fair 2 days ago that they said
in western
everyone
United
said to
States.
apply online. They have no information. It would just go online and apply. I'm never going to like in-person job fair
Reaching
again.
right
I
up
swear
to
to
the very
God.
tops of the hills, you see, and basically what you
I did
had
sign up for the military though.
was you had this enormous gush
Online.
of water filling these mountain valleys almost to the mountain peaks and then draining away. And as it drained away, it left this succession of shoreline etched into the hillside. This is the Assiniboine River flowing in here. This is a huge spillway carved by glacial meltwater mega floods. What we're seeing here is a beautiful example of an underfit river, as it's called by geologists, where the modern river is extremely small compared to the channel that it's in. And the modern river did not create the channel that it's
So that one he was stuck. And I shot
This channel was produced when the glacial ice receded far enough back,
really far
towards
left.
the land, and then subjected to these huge meltwater flows that came down,
Which is interesting.
and cut these spillways literally probably in a matter of weeks or even days. At the maximum flow, peak flow, this entire scene was submerged. And
Yo,
that
gotta
was
head
referred
towards
to
mud.
as a sheet flood. A sheet flood will move along and it's spread out, and it'll be relatively shallow, but widespread.
Yo, thanks,
And
Bukakis.
then what happens is there will be some zone of weakness, some zone of least resistance, and the water will selectively erode
Thanks
that
for being here.
faster than the contiguous land surface. But once it does that, as it begins to erode down, what's it begin to do? It begins to capture some of that volume that's now spread out. As it does that, now it becomes even more erosive. And so what you have is it's a transitional process from sheet flood to channelization. So the water becomes channelized. What people don't realize is that most of the river valleys in North America are underfit. Most of the modern rivers are occupying huge channels that were created by enormously augmented flows. Those rivers are just simply taking advantage of the existence of these spillways. They've been captured by the spillways. They did not create the spillways. Right there in the Clark Fork Valley, and you may be tempted, like, to pull up Google Earth if you get a chance. Look at the Clark Fork Valley, and what you'll see there is a valley that's basically about 7 miles wide. Varies between 3 miles and 7 miles wide. And water flowing through there was over 2,000 feet deep. And it was probably moving in the order of 50 to 60 miles an hour. Now, the peak discharge of that water, that flood water passing through that valley, is estimated to be about 350 million cubic feet per second.
Yeah, man, the used car market
Now,
is so terrible.
that's really almost inconceivable. So we're talking about maybe a third of the largest discharge estimated.
Especially in in Canada, most cars are automatic.
The ice 12,000 years ago. If you took
I'm not
every
calling automatic
single
cars terrible. Just for me,
stream,
it's not my
creek, and river
preference.
flowing on Earth today, every single one, added them together, every river, the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Mackenzie, the Yukon, the Columbia, the Rhone, the Rhine, the Amazon, every one, large and small, added them together, multiply that by 10, and you still wouldn't have the flow that was going through the Clark Fork Valley. And that was just one of hundreds of flows of meltwater coming off the ocean. And all of this is ultimately flowing into the oceans of the world and rapidly bringing sea level up. Because you see, we're talking about a massive, massive extreme, severe disruption of the ice sheet complex around 12,000 years ago, 13,000 years ago. And as a consequence of that, there were just these enormous floods of meltwater issuing off the front of the ice sheet.
What? Why?
What
Like,
kind of
why?
events
Where?
are we
Like,
looking
why?
at whose aftermath is this?
The energy required
It's just so fucking
is
dumb.
astonishing. We look at all the cross-section of possible explanations within the realm of nature. We can go through and we can eliminate this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and what we're left with is one that of itself would be fully capable of doing it. I believe that it was a series of impacts that caused the rapid melting of the ice sheet. There are bombardment epochs. You may have periods of time where you have multiple impacts occurring over a short period of time associated with the destruction and disintegration of large comets, or even multiple impacts occurring all at once. Go back to the Ice Age, there's approximately 6 to 7 million additional square miles of the Earth's surface that is covered by massive ice sheets. Most of that is in the Northern Hemisphere. Now, if you have a bombardment in the Northern Hemisphere at this time, the chances are much higher that that impact could have been into an ice sheet.
Once you get the eyes to see, it's that obvious. You're seeing wounds in the surface of the Earth from ancient catastrophes, ancient disasters.
In the global landscape is a story, an amazing story, and it's a story that essentially, without that story, we're going to have no understanding of our own place in the natural order of things. We'll have no understanding of the deep view of human history on planet Earth.
I guess based on the ice core records that we have from Greenland
geological consent,
and
subject to change
Antarctica,
without notice.
those ice cores that they dig into the ice sheet, into the glaciers, and they can see the strata of levels of temperature and carbon dioxide over the past million years.
Was named Homo adultus, and
using like isotope data, they see that carbon dioxide levels now, which are uniform worldwide, interestingly enough, are at about 423 parts per million, and the highest that carbon dioxide has been on Earth over the past million years previously was only 300 parts per million. So that means there's like a 1.5 times more, or yeah, there's 450 now and there was 300 in the past at the highest point. But what's interesting is that we're at the end of the Milankovitch cycle, which is a 26,000 year process of precession of the Earth, the angle of the Earth, right, which causes ice ages and the removal ice ages on a 10,000 year cycle. So we are actually, ironically, at the beginning of the very end of the warm period and or the start of the new ice age. At the start, but I mean, there has to be error bars of at least 200 to 300 years, at least, probably 500 to 1,000, especially with the delayed movement and the covariable of the increase of CO2 to 450 parts per million versus 300 in the past, which is really ironic because if global warming is real, which it seems like it is with the melting of all the ice caps and everything, the question is, could it prevent the next ice age? Which I think is a really valid and interesting question. And actually kind of useful. That could be probably the best resolution for Earth and humanity, honestly. If the ice age comes and our global warming mitigates it, that'd be insane. But what's interesting is that the release of carbon dioxide is associated with release from the ocean of carbon dioxide, right? So in the Greenland ice cores, you see
beyond
temperature and
anything that we
carbon
even
dioxide
imagined up
really
until
strongly
a
correlated
decade
through
or 2
time,
decades.
but we're not sure which
They're
is
real.
the
Okay, on the
which
other
produces
hand,
what.
we have
The Earth may be
stories and
warmer,
myths
which
and legends.
releases carbon dioxide from the
Repeatedly,
oceans,
it's
which
probably
might
the
be that
most
carbon dioxide
ubiquitous
is
of
our
all the stories
responding
that we've
variable,
inherited from the past, is this story of
which is interesting in itself.
world-destroying flood.
But the greenhouse
My
effect of the
contention
carbon
is,
dioxide
what we're
in
really
itself
seeing
kind of shows
7,
evidence
8,
that it probably
9,000
has a
years
runaway
ago is
effect
not
to an
the
extent.
origins of
To a
civilization,
point that we
but the
don't
way
understand
we
over the past million years.
You know, if you ask most people, almost everybody's heard of Atlantis.
Exactly. We
Where did
don't.
this
Well, we
story
don't. We
come
don't
from?
know.
Where
I
did
don't
it
know.
originate? Well, as far as our
That's a
own,
good question. People say that the
our
carbon
own
dioxide is
scholarly
released from the oceans
understanding
because
of it
of
emanated from Plato.
warming,
What you have to do is, if you're
which I
going
mean I
to
don't doubt.
address the question
That's
of
chemistry.
Atlantis, is you have to address the
But what I'm saying
veracity
is, so
of
you asked about
Plato's
the
account.
human activity.
Did he mean it metaphorically,
Well,
or did he mean it literally?
if you look at carbon
Make that judgment, you actually
14
can't
versus carbon
directly to
13
Plato himself.
isotope
So
ratios in the
that's
atmosphere.
What I go to Plato and
I forget.
Atlantis
I actually
accounts
gave
showed
a
up
video, a
in two
talk on it on my
of his
YouTube,
dialogues,
explaining the carbon
Timaeus
isotope
and Critias.
ratio differences. Like, so if there's more carbon
The story
14 in the
goes
air
that,
than expected,
they're sitting
because
there at the Socratic Forum with Socrates, Timaeus, Critias, Plato,
What is it?
perhaps one other unidentified individual.
I think carbon
And
14
they're
is
all
old
telling
carbon.
stories.
I can't
It's a
remember.
round table, and each one is supposed to tell us.
I think
an
carbon
enlightening story.
13 is young. Oh, you watched
And,
that? What? Thanks, man. Thanks, homie.
When it comes to the
Got you.
turn of
Thanks, buddy.
Critias, he tells this.
No,
is
the only reason why I
Critias the
referenced that was
younger.
just because I can't
He
remember
tells the
exactly
story that he
the.
heard from his grandfather,
I think new
Critias the Elder,
carbons, plants
who in
create
turn heard
carbon
from his
13
uncle,
just as a byproduct error,
Tropides, who in
a
turn
manufacturing
heard it
error,
from
right? Quality
Solon,
control
the
issue.
Egyptian poet
It's just
and
a
lawgiver
harmless
who did
isotope, but it's a
10-year
good
exile in Egypt,
measuring stick.
roughly 100
Because
years
if you
before
find
Plato's
more
time.
carbon 12
While
in the
in
air than
Egypt,
carbon
he
13,
heard
as
the tale of
per the
Atlantis
burning
from
of fossil
elderly
fuels, right? Like I
Egyptian
think the
priests.
carbon. I think
Socrates
I'm
says,
mixing it up.
Very good. He's speaking to Critias. Very good.
sheer
What
carbon
is
14
this ancient famous action
in the
of which
atmosphere
Critias spoke,
from
not as
burning
mere legend,
fossil fuels,
but
because
as a
carbon 14 takes
veritable
longer to
action,
decay.
veritable meaning true, which Solon recounted.
There's
Then
a
listen,
there's a
Socrates,
flow
to a
chart that
strange
makes
tale
sense
which
on it. I
is,
can't remember it
however,
exactly. Because we're dealing with
certainly true.
carbon 13, carbon 12
Thither came
ratios, and
Solon,
carbon
who was received by them,
14, 12.
the
Carbon
Egyptian
14, 12 are
with great
the
honor.
aging.
And he asked the
Carbon
priests
14
who
aging.
were most skillful in such
Carbon
matters
13 is
about
water use
antiquity,
efficiency in plants.
and made the discovery that neither he nor any other Hellene or Greek
So if it has less
knew
carbon
anything worth
14,
mention about the times of
then you
old.
know it's
On one
from
occasion,
fossil
when
fuels.
he, Solon, was drawing them on to
Up
speak of
to
antiquity,
alternative
he
commentary.
began
Thanks,
to
man.
tell about the most
Well,
ancient things in our part of the world.
Thanks,
about
buddy.
Phronius, who is called the first, and about Niobe. Now, Niobe was the queen of Thebes,
Well,
the daughter of Tantalus. And after the deluge,
I think a lot of
after
the
deluge,
fires.
to tell of the lives of Deucalion and Pyrrha, and he traced
In Canada,
the genealogy
may have been
of their
arson.
descendants and attempted to reckon how
But
many years old were the
one of the
events
main
of which
issues
he was
with
speaking
that is the
naked.
fires in, say,
He
the
says,
east
"Thereupon
of
one
the
of
Amazon,
priests,
and they're cutting down a
who
lot of
was
the
of a
Amazon
very
right
great
now.
age, said, "O Solon,
So that was
you Hellenes are
dude.
but
Remember, I
children,
shot all the way left
and
there
was
again. You
never
see
an
that?
old man who was a
That's
Hellene."
twice I shot left and he got
Solon,
stuck.
hearing
I think
this,
I'm just gonna
said,
keep doing
"What do
that
you mean?"
because it's
I
really
mean
the
to say,
fastest.
replied the
Not
old
the
priest,
fastest,
that
but
in mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient
no, I think we
tradition,
should all be able to
nor
drive
any
V8s.
science which is hoary
We all
with age.
shouldn't,
And I will
especially
tell
the
you
West,
the
should
reason
not
for
reduce our
this.
consumption.
There have
If you look
been
at India and China,
and
they're
will be
the
again
majority of the
many
carbon dioxide
destructions
and
of
toxic
mankind,
fume producers in the world.
arising out of many
Carbon
causes,
taxes in the West is a
but the
retarded
greatest
idea.
have been brought about by the
Communist,
agencies of
evil
fire and water.
Idea.
Then he goes on to say, this is the preface. Now, this is the preface to the story of Atlantis,
And this climate
which I find
catastrophe
extremely
shit is
significant.
bullshit. I mean, it
There
could
is a
be.
story,
It might
but
be.
this is still the old
With the
priest talking,
desertification,
just
we
over.
might lose
There
the
is a
Amazon,
story
man. It's
which
getting
even
just
you,
cut up and chopped up
you
and
Hellenes
burned
know,
down.
like children who
Will
don't
it
know
recover?
anything
That's the
about
point.
past like we do.
Ecosystem
There's a
changes,
story which
and I've
even
worked
you
at it with
observed,
pollen
that once upon
over the
a
past
time,
10,000
Phaeton,
years in South
the
America,
son of
pollen
Peleus,
records, and it
having
shows
yoked the steeds in his
a
father's
shift
chariot,
through time.
but because he was
Like,
not able
if you
to
look in the
drive
very
him in
far
the path
east of
of
the
his
Amazon
father,
near the mouth,
burned
south
up
of the mouth
all that
is
was
like
upon
desert.
the earth, and was himself destroyed by a
Pernambuco
thunderbolt.
and
Phaeton was the son of Helios, but
POE.
didn't know it. So he's there.
It's just
going
it's
to
like
his school,
desert.
and
It's like
all of the boys are
dunes,
bragging
sand
about
dunes,
how great their
desert,
fathers are. But Phaeton didn't
and
know
the
who his father
Cerrado in the
was.
center
So
of
he goes
the
to his
country
mother,
of southern Brazil, of
and he
central
says,
Brazil,
"I
is
wanna know
becoming
about my father."
desert
She says,
almost,
"I guess
like
you're old enough. I'm
shrubland,
gonna reveal
especially
it to you.
near.
He is nothing.
I drove, dude. We
Nobody
drove
less than the
from
sun
southern
god
Brazil,
himself.
Porto Alegre, to a
And
conference
so
in Bonito
Phaeton
in
decides
central
that he
Brazil.
wants to make this journey
We drove there,
to where
and
his
like
father, the sun god,
right by, we
resides,
drove by
and
Falls
meet his
Iguazu,
father.
the
So
Iguazu
he
Falls. We didn't go
goes
see
there,
it, but
eventually
it was all
finds
clear
the
cut
place in
was
the
all clear cut.
heavens, right? And
with
his father's
cows,
so glad to see
zebu
him.
white,
He says,
zebu
"I will
cows.
grant you any boon
It's all clear
or
cut,
any
man.
promise that you
The,
want." So
and
then
the
Phaeton says,
soil
"Well,
is
I want
not
to drive
nutrient
your
rich
chariot."
because
So
the
this is
turnover is so
actually
high in
an
those
extract
in
now
the
from
tropical
both
forest
Phaeton's
ecosystem,
mythology,
right?
extract from the Fall of Phaeton.
But it's
And this
interesting.
is
The Amazon
aliens
was
now
once a
speaking. He
planted
says, "Suppose I should
forest,
lend you the
they say,
chariot. What
and
would you
there's a
do?
lot of evidence
Could
of
you keep your course while the
civilizations
sphere was revolving
Amazon.
under you? Perhaps you think that there
Not
are
a planted forest,
forests
but a
and
managed
cities,
forest,
the
I would
abodes
say.
of the gods and palaces and temples on the way.
pseudoscience,
On
climate
the
change, just
contrary,
right.
the road is
Oh,
through
for
the
sure.
midst of frightful monsters.
But it's
You
the
pass by the
intent.
horns of the bull.
It's like data is neutral
Taurus,
until
in
directed,
front of
right?
the archer.
It's the same thing. Like,
Sagittarius, and near the lion's jaws.
I'm
where the
saying,
scorpion
yeah,
stretches
carbon
its
dioxide
arms
is
in one
1.5
direction
times
and the
higher
crab in
now than it's
another.
been for the past
He's
million years.
describing
We have
the
no idea
plain
what
of
it's
the
going to do.
which is also the
We're already
the
seeing
region of
massive
short-wave
desertification
comets. He gets the
in
chariot.
Africa and Brazil.
The gates open. The
in
steeds
Peru,
run out,
East
pulling the
Peru.
chariot, and immediately realize that the hand on the reins
Like
is
mead is drying
weak
up, or
and not
dams. We're
powerful
fucking
and
everything up.
commanding like Helios.
Dude, we're fucked. Like,
So
we produce a
then
lot
they
of carbon
immediately
dioxide. There's a map
take off.
of the
And then
emissions
it
of
goes
carbon
on, when
dioxide
hapless Phaeton
released
looked down upon the earth,
from
now
the
spreading in vast
NOAA,
extent
the
beneath him.
National
He grew pale and his knees shook with
whatever.
terror. In spite of the glare all around
the
him,
most
sight of
official
his eyes grew
data
dim.
source in the United
He
States, and you
wished
look at the
he'd
map,
never
if the
touched
United
his
States is
father's
just,
horses.
you see much
Never
higher
learned
levels
his
of
parentage.
emissions.
Never prevailed in
Which is
his
fine.
request.
I'm not saying it's
He
fine,
is
but
borne
it's,
along like a vessel that flies before a tempest.
it is what it is.
When the pilot can do no more and betakes himself to prayers. He turns his eyes from one direction to
Doesn't
the
mean
other,
that-
now to the goal whence he began his course, now to the realms of sunset,
doesn't-
which he is not destined to reach.
It's insane.
He
Everyone
sees with
should
terror
drive a
the monstrous
V8
forms
car.
scattered over the surface of the heaven. Here, the scorpion extended his
Everybody
two great
needs
arms
their
with his
own
tail
large
and crooked
house.
claws stretching
Everybody
over two
needs to eat
signs of the
meat.
zodiac.
Unless they don't
When
want
the
to.
boy beheld him reeking with
Which I
poison
understand.
and menacing with his fangs, his courage failed, and the reins
It's
fell
insane, man.
from his hand. The horses, when they felt them loose on their backs, dashed headlong and
after cars
unrestrained,
now.
went off into unknown regions of the sky, in among the stars, hurling the chariot over pathless places, now up in high heaven, now down almost to earth. The moon
I want to start
saw
my. I want to
with
make my own
astonishment her
car
brother's chariot
company.
running beneath her own.
Honestly,
The clouds
my,
begin
like,
to
passion.
smoke. The mountaintops take fire. The fields are parched with
Build-
heat.
rebuild
The plants
kit
wither.
cars.
The trees with their leafy branches burn. The harvest is
Or get
ablaze.
kit cars
but
to people.
these are small things. Great cities perished
I guess
with
kit
their
cars
walls
aren't-
and towers.
have all these
Whole
laws
nations
against
with their
shit
people
like that.
were consumed to ashes.
Might not be road
The
legal.
forest-clad mountains burn with fires within and without, and Parnassus with his two peaks, and Rhodope, forced at last to part with his
Thanks,
snowy
man.
crown. Her cold climate
Thanks,
was
buddy.
no protection to Scythia. Caucasus burned, Ossa and Pindus, and greater than both Olympus, the Alps, high in
I go with the
air.
stealth
Then
stealth theme.
beheld the world on fire. And
Model
felt
it
the heat
after
intolerable.
the
The air he
B117 or
breathed
whatever
was
it
like
is.
the fire, the air of a furnace, and full of burning ashes, and the smoke
stealth
was of
bomber.
pitchy darkness. He dashed forward, he knew not whither. The Libyan desert was
I
dried
do like
up
black
to the
cars.
condition in which it remains to this day. The nymphs of the fountains with disheveled hair mourned their waters, nor were the rivers
'Cause,
safe
dude, hear me
beneath
out.
their banks.
You know how
The earth cracked
EVs?
open, and through
Okay,
the chinks,
say that we go the
light
way of the
broke
EV,
into
right?
Tartarus, and
Other than the
frightened
fact that it's
king of
potentially quite
shadows.
dangerous with the lithium batteries, but anyways, I digress.
Atlas
I think they're
himself
poorly
fables
engineered
and scarce holds up his burden.
because
If sea,
I
earth,
think
and heaven
if you
perish,
put
we
a gearbox
fall
in
into
an EV,
chaos, ancient chaos.
you'll get
Save
way
what
more
remains
efficiency.
to us from
It'll
the
be way
devouring
lighter. You'll only
flame.
need one
Oh,
motor.
take thought for our deliverance in this awful moment.
So say you put a
Thus
gearbox,
spoke the
your
earth,
motor's not running
overcome
at
with heat and
10,000
thirst,
RPM
could say no more.
down the highway.
Then Jupiter, omnipotent, calling to witness all the gods, including
way
him
better
who
range.
lent the chariot, and showing them
You can
that
actually
all was
move the
lost,
car's
and
weight,
unless
finally.
some speedy remedy were applied. Mounted
You know what I mean? I think there's a
lofty
huge
tower
market
from whence he
for
diffused
a
clouds
fucking
over the
gearbox
earth
in an electric car.
and hurls the forked lightning. But
It'd
at
be
that
like the best
time,
car
not a
ever.
cloud was to be found to interpose for a screen to earth, nor was a shower remaining
Limited 100
unexhausted.
miles per hour
He
due to no
thundered, and
gearbox.
brandishing a lightning bolt in his right hand, launched it against the charioteer.
Right, but I
Struck
mean,
him
what
at
if
that
you
moment from his seat and from existence.
But I mean, for like
Fate,
to make it as a useful car for
right in the
range and lighter,
Fate with his hair on fire. Fell
gear it. You know what I mean?
headlong
Gear the
like
engine.
a shooting star, which marks the heavens with its brightness as it falls.
You know what I mean?
And Eridanus, the great river, received
Like
him
short shift it,
and cooled his burning
short gear
flame.
it, just for even just let's just say
Italian
efficiency. But
Naiads, or Nereids,
in efficiency,
reared
you get a
tomb
lighter
for him,
car,
and his sisters, the Heliades,
you get longer range.
as they lamented his fate, were turned.
You only need to use one motor now, so you can make it rear-wheel
on the
drive
banks of the river,
or
their
front-wheel
tears,
drive or whatever,
which
or all-wheel
continued to
drive,
flow,
or put in
became
the back of the
amber
car.
as it dropped into the stream. And also, by the way, according to some of the myths, it was their tears that
I think it's a
then
genius
caused
idea. And then you can do the weight transfer, the clutch, right?
So
Like,
this
the
is-
I-
now this is-
the
this is
clutch
the
is
preface
so important
to the
for
tale
weight
of
transfer. It's
Atlantis.
insane.
There is a story which
Like, it's
even you
crazy.
have preserved that once upon
For braking?
upon a time.
What are you
fate,
doing? What are you doing? What are you doing
the
in
son
electric
of
car? You just slam the
Helios,
brakes. Is what you
having
do.
yoked the steeds in his
4,000
father's chariot.
pound two motor
But because
monstrosity.
he was not able to drive them in the path
It
of his
was like
father,
bad
burned
engineering.
up all
Bad
that was
engineering
upon the
type,
earth, and
Elon.
was himself destroyed
Bad
with a
engineering.
thunderbolt.
Bad. You don't know cars, and
Now
that's
listen to
cool.
what Plato
That's cool,
says.
bro.
Or
But
this is
don't
the
make a
Egyptian
fucking
priests
iPhone car.
speaking through Plato.
You don't really use the brakes
Now
in the
this
EV.
has
Oh wow,
the form of
that's
a-
insane. It's regenerative, right?
but it really
That's actually really
signifies
cool.
a declination
That's actually amazing.
of the bodies moving around the earth and in the heavens, and a great
What is it, kinda like
conflagration of all
Gears?
things upon
Super
the earth,
harsh regen. Yeah,
recurring at long intervals.
that's. I mean, it
This
is
is how
regen,
Plato actually begins the,
and it slows
the
the car.
account
I've
of
never driven
Atlantis
one though.
by referring to this myth of the earth having this encounter with what is undoubtedly a celestial object. So now this is, this again is the old.
I mean, they are nice cars, but I don't like the
Says,
engineering of them.
Many great and wonderful deeds are recorded of your state in our histories.
He's such a
one
bait
of
and
them
switcher, man. Remember
exceeds
the
all the
Roadster?
rest
I
in
still haven't seen a
greatness
Roadster in real
and
life. I
valor.
don't think a car even
For
exists.
these histories
probably was just
tell
fake.
of a mighty power which unprovoked made an
Like,
expedition
I'm not even
against
complaining
the
because I
whole
can't
of
afford
Europe
one.
and
I'm just
Asia,
saying I haven't even
and to
seen
which
one in real
your
life.
city put an end. This power came forth out of the Atlantic Ocean. For in those days the Atlantic
When you
was
come to
navigable.
Calusa, that's amazing. That's actually really
There
good.
was an island situated in front of the straits, which are by you
But
called the Pillars of Heracles.
you see where I'm going with Scotty,
The
though, right?
island
Like,
was larger than
and then
Libya
that
and
means
Asia put
shorter,
together
like, dude.
was the
It
way
means
to
shorter
other
charge
islands.
time
And from
with a
these,
shorter,
you might
with a
pass
smaller
to the
battery
whole
pack on a
of the
lighter
opposite
car.
continent, which surrounds the true
You
ocean.
might even be able to use some sort of different
Egyptians knew
technology, like a
about the
fast
presence of North
discharge,
America,
fast charge
Which surrounds the true ocean.
metal alloy.
Because as he says, for
Who
this
knows?
sea,
You know what I mean?
which is within the Straits of Heracles,
I know I'm talking out of my
he's
ass
talking
right now,
about the
but
Mediterranean, is only a harbor, having a narrow entrance. But that other
Put
is
a gearbox
sea,
in.
and the surrounding
just
land
like
may
make
be
it just
most
like a normal.
easily called
Let's just.
a boundless
I'm not even
continent.
outside the
Okay, so
realms
now
of the physical
listen to what the
impossibilities, right?
priest goes
Put a
on to say.
5-gear
Now,
in
in
a
this
Tesla.
island is the word.
on 5th gear, you're
Of
running at like
Atlantis, there was a great and wonderful empire.
say a V8, you're at
which had
2500,
rule
2700
over the whole
on the highway,
island and
RPM,
several others, and over parts of the
ready to
continent.
downshift at any time
very
into
much
fucking
distinguished
10,000.
between
Can you imagine
the
doing a
continent
fucking
and the
like
island.
burnout on the
But then he's
highway
saying-
at highway speed? You can do that in that car, but you can't now. You can't do that now.
And over parts of the continent. And furthermore, the men of
Sorry, man.
Atlantis
I'm
had
really
subjected
passionate
the
about this.
parts
I
of
think
Libya within the
I really
columns
do
of
want to fucking just
Heracles as far as Egypt.
design
This
a car.
vast power gathered into one endeavored to subdue at a blow our country.
It doesn't have to be through
and
Tesla. These are
the
just
whole
batteries. The
region
guy just literally
within the
taped a bunch of
straits.
batteries together. We can do that. We can do that,
Then
man.
Salon, your country
can do
shone
that.
forth in the excellence of her virtue and strength among all mankind.
can do it, dude.
For she was first encouraged in military skill and was the leader of the Hellenes. So then they have this big
I
war.
installed.
And led
dang,
by
we got some knowledge drop.
peoples within the Straits of Gibraltar around the Mediterranean, led by these proto-Athenians, freely liberated all the others who dwell within the limits of Heracles. And then, afterwards, there occurred violent earthquakes and floods. In a single day, night of rain, all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth. So in other words, he's referring now to something that's happening in the Greek peninsula, right? And
Crazy.
the island of Atlantis, in like manner,
Yeah, our
disappeared
government
and
was gone
sunk
full commie
beneath
mode.
the sea. Now, to me, that is pretty explicit. Solon's
They attempted,
trip
or
to
they
Egypt
put in a law
took
that
place
no new
roughly
gas cars
600
2025 or
BC.
something. Full
The
commie.
narrative that the
We're the next
Egyptians
Cuba.
tell Solon, and
we
this
don't
is,
change.
this number is repeated multiple times throughout Plato's two dialogues, is 9,000
The
years
U.S.
ago.
is also in on
Just
the
do math,
gig.
11,600 years ago. So his date coincides precisely with the date of Meltwater Pulse 1b. What's interesting is that there is a tremendous amount of evidence that has accumulated over the last 50 or 60 years suggesting that that rapid rise in sea level did in fact trigger massive earthquakes. And there's evidence that there was some pretty extreme subsidence of the ocean bottom as a result of isostatic compensation. When you release all the ice,
So
from
can
the
you even gear
continents,
down in an EV?
place
There is no gear
roughly,
down.
I've worked it out. The amount of ice.
What
that
if you
melted
what if you
was
want to
transferred into the
what if you're going
Atlantic
into a
Ocean
corner?
was about 24 quadrillion metric tons.
What if you're coming out of a corner?
So this is the mid-Atlantic ridge. And you'll see right here, we go west from the Strait of Gibraltar, which in the olden days was called the Pillars of Heracles. We come to the Azores Plateau. And what we have here is a triple plate junction. We have three plates. We have the North American plate, we have the Eurasian plate, and we have the African plate, all meet
Wow, crazy.
right here. And you can see the suture line that comes down here, separating the North American plate here from the European plate here, sometimes called the Eurasian plate, and the African plate here. So this is a triple junction. So a triple junction is going to be one of the most flexible and
I think this is
thinnest
bad
pieces of crust on the
engineering.
planet. So this isostatic compensation, which causes vertical movements, could be strongly localized around this particular zone of
Yeah,
weakness.
but what if it was a
And you
what
get
if it was a
these
well-engineered
large transform faults
car?
that are coming essentially at right angles to
What
the
if it was
rig?
like a
You
good
could-
car?
You could realistically think
what's
of
up with
those as
Sandoval?
almost
What's
like the
Christian?
Earth's stretch marks. So the question
Just because
would be,
they're
is it
just
possible
they're
that
designed like
this Azores Plateau was significantly
the design isn't good.
immersed
It's a bad design.
during the last ice age? And I think the answer to that would be it quite likely was.
Because they're shit
We know
cars.
that today there are just mere islands
Bad
there, but we know
designs.
that those islands are the tips of mountain ranges.
What's up, man?
This is the Azores
Alrighty, bud, no
Islands,
stress, dude.
and this is called the Atlantis, curiously, the Atlantis Seamount, Plato Seamount, the Great Meteor Seamount, and Cruiser Seamount. During the Ice Age, I think it's now
But I
safe
guess
to
people are
conclude there
retarded.
have
They
been
buy
large,
really terrible
almost
vehicles.
mountainous islands
Like fucking
rising above the ocean
whatever.
level. Over here, where you have what is now the islands of the Azores, were probably interconnected, and it's possible that a
good
large
question,
section
Christian.
of this
I probably
submerged
can.
microcontinent here was then above sea level. So
Can you imagine? I start working in Canada, I'm Amazon, which gets me into the United States and gets my green card. That'd be amazing. Oh my god,
we
dude.
refer to the Atlantic
That'd be the
Ocean,
best.
but you know, in Greek, the
Good question,
word for
Christian.
ocean is
I'm gonna
thalassos.
look into it.
And if you go back and you read the original Greek Atlantic Ocean,
Paying a premium
Atlantic,
for them. People
the
power.
name of our ocean was spelled Alpha
Yeah.
Tau Lambda Alpha Nu
But the people in Canada suck.
Tau Iota
Are shit.
Sigma.
Are stupid.
In the Greek, the sigma
pieces of
was
shit.
a sibilant. That means it's a fricative. So the
No, really.
difference is, for example,
I don't
you
want to
know
be just
that
like
at
a
least in
little
English,
whiny
the letter
guy,
C
but it's
has
true,
two
man.
sounds,
They're just
right?
so shit.
So as a fricative, it's an S sound. As a floative, it's a K
No, it's
sound.
true, though.
Okay, in the original Greek, the final sigma was a sibilant.
There's not much
so in other
hope
words,
for
it was a
Canada.
soft S sound, not a
After
hard
the
C
just
sound.
the whole
So, in the
discrimination
original
that
Greek,
occurred,
the Atlantic
like they
Ocean
went full
was
cycle, and they
the
don't even
Atlantis
understand.
Ocean.
They don't even understand that.
We know now that events are in the history of this planet
They don't even understand the severity
basically,
of what they
lay
did.
waste to an entire region, landscape, perhaps even a continent, are very real. And that they've happened recently enough that it's in the memory of the living memory of modern human beings. So it's not any extravagant or outrageous conclusion to think that
Yeah,
these kinds of things found their way into the stories, into the traditions, into the mythology,
Yeah.
into the legend, into the folklore.
They're not making the Camaro and fucking Challenger after next year, I think. It's just so tragic.
The Day of the Dead, or the Festival of the Dead, is not confined to America or Britain, but it is universal tradition that passed down from generation to generation for many, many centuries. So
Thanks,
far,
man.
so many centuries, in fact, that we don't really even know its origin.
So yeah,
On Halloween, when the Festival of the Dead commenced, the spirits of the dead wander more than at any other time of the year. This is a night when devils,
Can you imagine,
witches,
though,
and other mischief-making
an electric car with a gearbox
are
that
all
has
abroad on their
600,
baleful
700,
midnight
whatever
journey.
kilometer range,
This is a 19th
weighs
century
2,700 pounds.
Halloween. And this is from
Even
the
less.
Encyclopedia
Like, how much did the
Britannica,
Roadster weigh?
1963 edition.
How much could the Roadster have
In
weighed?
its strictly religious
Liars,
aspect,
bunch of fucking liars.
this occasion is known as the Vigil of Hallowmass or All Saints' Day. November 1st, observed by the Roman Catholic and Anglican churches. In Great Britain,
Yeah, that was
Ireland,
probably
and
the
United
biggest bait and
States,
switch in
ancient
history.
Halloween folk customs persist alongside the ecclesiastical observance.
The Tesla
The occasion
Roadster.
shows clear connections with the religion of the Druids in pre-Christian Ireland and Scotland.
I think that's
The
why
Celtic
people really.
year ended on October 31st, the
It's just,
eve of
just
Samhain,
lies, man.
and was celebrated with both religious and agrarian rites. For the Druids, Samhain was both the end of summer and a festival of the dead. Here's a partial list
Cool,
of
man.
ancient cultures that observed the festival of the dead in either late October or early November.
It's pretty dope, man.
As you go down the list, you can see there's the Judeo-Christian, the Celtic Druidical, the Anglo-Saxons, Dutch and Swede, in Egypt, Assyria, Persia, Peru, Polynesia, Mexico, India, the Mayans, the Australians, and the Japanese. The thing to be aware of is the fact that all of these
Yeah, and gas is way too
all these
expensive
people
now.
all had a festival of the dead. And it was all, in each case, celebrated either at the very end of October or the beginning of November. And in many cases, it all went 3 days, just as in our Judeo
Oh my god, the roll.
of All Hallows Eve,
What?
All Saints, and All Souls. Was there a
Good
conceivable
luck finding him, Johnny. Help just
mark
ask me. Thanks, buddy.
provided by
Thanks, man. I
nature
appreciate that, man. That's
all the
nice of you,
nations
dude.
of the ancient world could have observed?
It's nice of you, man.
Late October, early November. If you go outside at midnight, face due south, you will see the Pleiades crossing
Thanks,
the
buddy.
local meridian. That is the line that reaches from the zenith.
It's actually not a bad
due
idea
south, that imaginary line,
to get a job.
the culmination of the grand
either with an
arch,
American
the
company
royal
through an
arch,
American
the
company
celestial arch that is
in order to
united
move
with
to the United
with all
States.
the zodiacal signs, and you will see the bull
It's
will
genius.
be at the keystone of that arch. And at midnight, the shoulder of the bull, marked by the Pleiades, will occupy that position in the sky. Now, ancient peoples all over the world would have seen this same astronomical phenomenon at the same time, whether or not they were in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, that the Pleiades would mark the local meridian at midnight. So, the Pleiades were
Wow,
quite
insane.
frequently used to
Had a
mark
feeling.
the ancient calendar, to mark the beginning of the new year. So now we have this idea that all over the ancient world,
Thanks for being here, Scotty and
see
Sandoval
Pleiades
and
culminating
Lukakis.
at midnight, at the highest peak of that ecliptic arch, crossing the local meridian. Now,
What?
that in itself could be significant, simply because it provides a very accurate way of calibrating the
Why?
ancient calendar. But there was another significance to the Pleiades. What most people don't realize
So
is
fucking
that there
dumb.
are certain very precise details
Go to sleep tonight. No worries, but oh wow, insane.
regarding the events of the Great Deluge.
Legend.
We find
Thanks,
that it
Christian. How you
says
doing? How you
600
doing?
years
Appreciate that,
Noah
man. I think I'm gonna go downstairs and fill my 4-liter water jug. It's empty.
were all the fountains of the great deep,
Forgot to fill it last night.
and the windows of heaven.
And get a protein shake and maybe some
To the
food.
ancient Hebrew calendar,
Have a good night, buddy.
we will find that the deluge occurred very close to early morning.
Appreciate that,
The
man.
Hindus pictured these
nice
stars,
of
the
you.
Pleiades, as a flame typical of Agni, the god of fire, and a region.
Sorry, Scotty. I
of
guess
absolute.
I was
It
much more
thought that
angry
there
about
may be a
the
connection
cars
between
than
the Hindu title
that was something
flame
really on my
and
chest.
the great feast of lamps of the Western Hindus held in the Pleiades.
I'm just like I think I'm just so
October,
frustrated
November, a
because
great festival of the dead, which gave rise to the present feast of lamps.
why is it hard for me to
Yeah.
find an
Among the
affordable
Aztecs of South America, we find the Pleiades,
2-door
the
small
cynosure
car right
of all
now
eyes. That
for
is
me?
the central attractor, right? The central
It's not
thing of
insanely
interest.
expensive.
The cynosure of all eyes, a nation
Motherfuckers.
trembling at their feet. At the end of every period of 52 years, in the month of November, when the Pleiades would culminate at midnight, these people imagined the world would end. Human
Why did
sacrifices
Tesla
were
lie,
offered,
man?
while
Elon
the
Musk
entire
is such a piece of
population
shit.
passed the night upon their knees,
He's evil.
awaiting their doom.
I think
Far
his
removed from
purpose
the
is
Aztecs,
to
we find the
get
people of
people on board on
Japan
like
in their
the
great
brain
national festival,
implant
the Feast of the Lanterns.
device
A feast that is alive today, commemorating at
plugging
the same
into
season
his
of the year
brain
some
into people's
great
brains.
calamity, which was
If you look at
supposed
the
to
new
have
Google
overwhelmed
goggles,
the
there's
race
this
of man.
cable
Far distant past.
on the side.
These 7 little
It looks like a
stars were
medical.
prominent in the heavens. In the Talmud, we find a curious legend.
It looks like
associated
the
with
brain
Pleiades
connection device
all
that Elon
destroying
wants to
flood,
put in
expressed
humans.
as follows. When the Holy
It's
One,
gonna be some
blessed
weird
be he,
transition.
wished to bring the deluge upon
Be
the
some
world,
weird feeling on the
he
temple
took 2
first, and then people are
stars
just gonna
out of
do
the
it.
Pleiades,
Not there's
and
anything
thus
wrong with it.
let the deluge
I know
loose.
people have done the cochlear implants or
As we
the
have seen, the ancient Hindus,
the
the Aztecs,
for
and the
hearing.
Japanese all had memorial
half deaf.
festivals in the month of
I
November.
looked at that. I was
Among
considering
the
it.
ancient Egyptians, the same day was observed.
I hadn't. I
And
decided
although their
not.
calendar was
I think I
subsequently
decided not to do it.
changed,
but-
the occasion was not lost sight of. The
Yeah, I
date
don't
of their
think I'm gonna do
celebration
it.
was determined by the culmination
no
of
plans
the
to do it.
Pleiades at midnight. And on this date, the solemn 3-day festival
But
commenced.
anyways,
With them, as with
I know
the
some
3
viewers have
previously
that,
mentioned
and they
nations,
mentioned that before
the festival
in chat.
was associated with the tradition of a deluge or race-destroying calamity. This closely associated star group has from time immemorial impressed mankind with a sense of mystery. And here we get to the crux of the matter. The great cataclysm is in some way connected with the Pleiades, and some reference to such an event can be traced in many of the legends and myths surrounding these stars that have come down to us from nations far removed from each other. We now turn to Mexico, and there we find that the great festival of the Mexican cycle was held on the 17th of November and was regulated by the Pleiades. It began at sunset, and at midnight, as that constellation approached the zenith,
a human victim
What the
was
fuck is
offered up
this?
to avert the dread calamity which they believed impended over the human race. They had a tradition that at that time the world had been previously destroyed, and they dreaded lest a similar catastrophe would, at the end of a cycle, annihilate the human race. What in the world could be this connection between the Pleiades and this ancient tradition of the destruction and reconstruction of the world? The Mexicans told of certain stars called Zontamoc, or falling hairs, which fell from heaven to earth with the Lord of the dead. Their fall was commemorated annually in the Cajoli festival, said to have been held towards the end of October. This festival and the falling of the stars was associated with the end of the world. At Akansa, in the Yucatan, a Maya zodiac was placed on the stucco facade of a mound, probably long prior to the coming of the Spaniards. It was probably at least 600 years old when it was exhumed. On this zodiac, which represents the signs in regular sequence, the position of Taurus is occupied by two panels, the lower of which represents the rattle of a snake. It is Tzabek, the rattle
So dumb.
asterism, our Pleiades. The upper panel contains a down-flying, semi-human or ape-like figure.
Why?
Beside his tail are
Like
star
what?
symbols, and above his head spears or arrows, implements of war, which in the Cajoli festival represent the end of the world marked by the fall of the Zontamoc. We see the diving monkey figure on the stucco relief. Here's the rattlesnake glyph. Up here, associated with this God falling to earth, this is the great urn being overturned and pouring out the waters of the flood onto the earth. The fall of Zontamoc has its counterparts in other traditions. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, we have the fall of Lucifer, a god that has disobeyed the edicts of heaven and is now being punished. Remember, the word Lucifer meant light bringer. We have Lucifer, we have Zontamoc. They are counterparts of each other. Back to Zontamoc, the falling god from the Codex Borgia. Here we have Zontamoc falling to earth, the Lord of the Dead, falling to earth in late October. And as it says there, note the rattlesnake glyph in the lower right-hand corner. So right here, in this codex, in painting from this codex, we have the secret revealed. The Pleiades were associated with the fall to earth of these celestial gods that destroyed the world. Now, you may recall that the Pleiades is part of the constellation of the bull. In fact, the Pleiades forms what is usually given to be the shoulder of the bull. Right? This is Taurus, the bull. And here we have the orbits of the Taurid meteors. The Taurid meteor system is a great family of meteors. It's
They didn't
probably
shoot more
very
bullets.
old.
They didn't hear me. It's just so dumb.
The consensus opinion that is emerging among astronomers
With the
is
PP7.
the Taurid system of meteors are the fragments of an ancient giant comet that came into the solar system some 20 to 30,000 years ago and began to undergo a fragmentation process, a hierarchy of disintegrations. As it did so, it spawned a meteor stream. And in the early days of the arrival of this celestial object into the inner solar system, this meteor stream would have been very densely populated with numerous objects of all different sizes, ranging from dust up through boulders to perhaps even small mountain-sized debris. Well, if we look at this map, this would be as if we were looking at the solar system from above, looking down on the sun, the plane of the ecliptic or orbital plane of the planets. We have Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. If we look at the Earth orbit, we'll see here this green arrow is showing us that this is the Earth orbit, right here. This is the orbit of the Taurid meteor star. On 2 occasions, for a period of 1 to 2 weeks, the Earth is passing through that stream. On the earliest part of the year, in late June, it passes through the stream as it's moving from around the sun. You see this, the Taurid stream is moving
What the
in
fuck?
the same counterclockwise direction as all the planets. The Earth continues around, and then in the fall, late October, early November, it crosses the stream again. Now, 2 points here. When it's crossing the stream in the fall, if you look upstream, upriver, so to speak, of this stream of debris coming at you, you would be looking along this line directly towards the Pleiades. So it would give the illusion that this material is emanating out of, descending from the Pleiades, the shoulder of the bull. As the material comes around here, if Earth passes in late summer, it would be very difficult to see, because if you look here and you're looking upstream here, you're looking in the general direction of the sun. And so the sun would tend to block these out, and you would not see them in the summer. Now, the point of this here is that ancient peoples may have been living during a time when this stream was much, much more active. And during those 2 times each year, when the Earth is crossing the stream, we would be more vulnerable to a catastrophe triggered by an encounter with some member, some denizen of that stream. And here we have Mithras, the ancient god of the Persians. And we see in this particular image, this bas-relief carving, which is called the Tauroctony, the slaying of the bull. Mithras is plunging a sword into the shoulder of the bull. We now know that the shoulder of the bull is a symbol for the Pleiades, and is in the effigy in the sky is actually occupied by the Pleiades. Mithras
Please.
plunges his
No,
sword into the shoulder of
why?
the bull, and the blood.
That was
of
so
the bull
fast.
is
That was
flowing
such a
out
fast
and
start.
lapped up by the dog. Well, we now realize that we have an actual physical astronomical counterpart to this in the illusion of the meteor stream flowing out of the shoulder of the bull. There's a lot going on here in this symbolism. I'll only point out to you the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stars that typically represent the ancient Pleiades, showing the connection between Mithras and the Pleiades. We see the 2 torchbearers. In this case, we see that both torchbearers are pointing their torches down towards the earth.
Here's Europa being abducted by Zeus in the form of a white bull. You notice the torchbearer here also. Note Mithraic elements. This is from a wall painting found in Rome. The important thing here, notice she's about to stab the bull in the shoulder, Europa. Here is a chariot with steeds. This represents Phaeton's chariot. So in this particular painting, they're showing the Phaeton chariot. He's holding something in his hand here, which I interpret to be the bow line. And then down here, what's happening here, you got Poseidon. He's overturning the urn, and the waters of the great flood are spilling out on the earth. So in this particular painting, each of these events is being associated. The abduction of Europa, the stabbing of the bull in the shoulder, the torchbearer, the Phaeton myth, and then the Great Deluge.
And finally, another scene from Mithraism. Mithras with a lion-headed god, breathing fire out. You see the serpent. Now he holds his torches. The torches.
And I mean,
of
if people with Teslas are so environmentally conscious, I mean, would you not want to reduce your battery size? And would you not want to put a gearbox in your car to reduce the battery size in your car and the environmental footprint? What if you could reduce your environmental footprint by 75% of the batteries by putting a gear transmission in your car?
Around the world, celebrated
They
their
won't do
Day of
it
the Dead on November 7th.
because they're fake.
What is very interesting about that date is the peak of another one of the great meteor showers, which is the Leonids, which appear to emanate from the constellation of Leo. And I would submit to you that this ancient Persian effigy has a reference to the constellation of Leo, and the tradition that fire came out of the constellation of Leo and ignited the world. So there you've got the bull and you've got the lion, two of the creatures depicted, one half of the four creatures that represent the apocalypse, shown on tympanums of cathedrals, shown in many different forms, many different places as the bull, the lion, the eagle, and the man. And so now we understand that there's another level of meaning to this celebration of Halloween, when the little children are going out and dressing up like ghosts and witches and goblins and zombies and so on, is that what we're actually doing is commemorating those who died in the great world destructions that preceded the rise of our own civilization.
Oh. Oh.
Think about how these ideas are embedded in the very language. Think of disaster. The root of that is aster. Right at the center of the word is the star. Look at the word catastrophe. Same thing. The root of the word catastrophe, star. And then we look at the traditions about stars falling to earth. The stars fell onto the earth as fig leaves shaken from a tree, a fig tree, in a mighty wind. When we go back to the very beginning of recorded history 5,000 years ago, we find this very sophisticated knowledge. We find knowledge of astronomy, of geometry, of geology and geodesy. So what we're seeing is these very simplistic societies that are either hunter-gatherers or subsistence farmers. One generation, a generation or two later, they're building these extraordinary temples. Human history on planet Earth is far more complex and far deeper than the older models would lead us to believe. What we think of as history is essentially only the last page of a book that goes back 150 to 200,000 years or maybe longer.
Yo, Moonraker, buddy. Moonraker, we trust, buddy. Thanks, man. What's up, man? I'm gonna get some water, refill the 4-liter tank.
Profoundly catastrophic. We've got to come to terms with the fact that we are living on a vulnerable planet. And from time to time, this planet is susceptible.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, homie.
Catastrophic trigger events. And not only have these events caused the extinction of species in the biological record, they're also the cause of the extinction of civilizations in the cultural record. I think that there's a reason that this information has come down to us. And it's not so that we can throw up our hands in despair and say that we're doomed, but so that we can understand the realistic context of life on planet Earth. It is the doom of men that they forget.
401 BC, at the height of the period known as the Greek Golden Age, a Persian prince named Cyrus the Younger was fighting a bitter civil war against his brother and was trying to seize the throne of Persia. To help him in this fight, he hired a mercenary army of mostly Greek soldiers, 10,000 men who traveled the long road to Persia to fight on his behalf. Among them was the Greek writer and adventurer named Xenophon, and he later wrote about this expedition in his work entitled Anabasis. Xenophon and his companions met the enemy Persian army at the Battle of Cunaxa, on the banks of the Euphrates River, and they gave the Persian prince Cyrus value for his money. The Greek heavy troops beat the Persians back and delivered a victory for the man who had hired them. But when the dust of battle had cleared, they heard the bad news. Cyrus the Younger had been killed, apparently knocked from his horse by a young common soldier. His claim to the throne of Persia had died with him, and the war was over. For the Greeks, this must have been heartbreaking. Their long journey, the victorious battle, and all their sacrifices had been for nothing. Their general had also been killed, and all of their senior commanders captured, leaving them without a leader and stranded in the middle of a foreign land. Now Xenophon and what remained of his 10,000 men had to find their way home to Greece. They knew that their only route was to reach the Black Sea, which lay across the wide deserts of what is today Iraq. They were terrified. They had few supplies, and the enemy army was already pursuing them close behind. They hastily elected some leaders from among them, and Xenophon was one of them. He told his men to throw away everything they carried, shedding weight in order to outrun their enemies, and so they pelted across the deserts and the fertile river lands dotted with date palms, following the course of the river Tigris north. And it's while they fled in this manner that they stumbled upon something that must have made them stop in their tracks. It was the enormous, crumbling ruin of a city, completely deserted, and full of the vast ruins of ancient buildings. This city was larger than anything Xenophon had seen back home in Greece, and later he wrote about this discovery in his work Anabasis.
Kai hoi men polemioi, hou to praxantes apelthon, hoi de Hellenes aspalos porelomeno.
The Greeks continued their march unmolested through the remainder of the day, arrived at the Tigris River. Here was a large, deserted city. Its wall was 25 feet in breadth, 100 in height. The whole circuit of the wall was 11 kilometers. It was built of clay bricks, rested upon a stone foundation 6 meters high. Nearby this city was a pyramid of stone, a plethrum in breadth, and 2 plethra in height. And upon this pyramid were many barbarians who had fled away from the neighboring villages.
Hypsos, δύο πλέθρων, επιτάωτες, πολλοί των μπαρμπάρων έσαν εκ των πλαισίων κομμών από πεφεογκότες.
But Xenophon didn't have time to linger. The pursuing Persians were right behind them, and he couldn't spare any time to explore the ruins. They dashed onwards, following the river north. But then, only a day or 2 later, the Greeks came across another ruin, this one even larger and more impressive, surrounded by an enormous series of crumbling walls.
Εντέουθεν δε πορεύθες εν σταθμόν, χένα παρασάκας, hex προς τέκος ere.
The Greeks marched 34 kilometers to a great stronghold, deserted and lying in ruins. The foundation of its wall was made of polished stone, full of shells, It was 15 meters in breadth and 15 in height. Upon this foundation was built a wall of brick, 15 meters in breadth and 30 meters in height, and the circuit of the wall was 30 kilometers.
Once again, they had no time to stop. But it's clear that the sight of these lonely, crumbling ruins affected Xenophon. For days afterwards, he asked any local people he encountered who had built such enormous constructions all alone out there in the desert. No one he spoke to could tell him anything, and it seemed no one even knew the names of these great cities. Some people thought they might have been built by the Medes, a people who now occupied the area. Others told fantastical stories about the gods bringing down fire and thunder to destroy these ancient walls, killing everyone who had once lived within them. Today, we do know the names of these cities, and it's thought that Xenophon, at the end of the 5th century BC, was the earliest person to stumble upon them and write an account. These were the cities of Nimrud and Nineveh. At the time when Xenophon stumbled across these ruins, nearly 2.5 millennia ago, the first stones of the Parthenon in Athens had been laid only 50 years earlier. The Colosseum in Rome would not be built for another 500 years. But the city of Nineveh had already been an ancient ruin for more than 2 centuries. This mighty city had flourished, boomed into a towering capital, home to hundreds of thousands of people. It had given birth to some of the ancient world's most beautiful art and architecture, and then, all at once, fallen into dust. Xenophon and his men did eventually return to Greece, and when he wrote his memoirs, he gives special attention to those moments, when he looked out over the sand-blasted desert, the grasses sprouting between the crumbling bricks, as the wind battered his hair and tugged at his clothes. In those moments, Xenophon must have asked himself, who were these people who built such vast cities out here in the desert? How could such a great metropolis vanish so completely beneath the sands? And if so many people had once lived there, what in all the world could have happened to them? My name's Paul Cooper, and you're listening to the Fall of Civilizations podcast. Each episode, I look at a civilization of the past that rose to glory, and then collapsed into the ashes of history. I want to ask, what did they have in common? What led to their fall? And what did it feel like to be a person alive at the time who witnessed the end of their world? In this episode, I want to look at one of the most remarkable ancient civilizations, the society known today as the Assyrian Empire. I want to explore how the Assyrians built their empire out of the ashes of the Bronze Age and built an empire of iron that lasted for centuries. I want to show how they expanded and developed to become perhaps the world's first military superpower, as well as fostering an extraordinary flourishing of art and learning. And finally, I want to tell the story of what happened to cause their final, devastating collapse. In this episode, we return for the first time to a setting that we've seen before, in episode 8 on the Sumerians. These are the arid desert lands of Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is a vast floodplain. For millions of years, its lands have been watered by two great rivers, the river Tigris and the river Euphrates. These great watercourses flow south from the mountains of Turkey and bring enormous quantities of silt down with them. If we were to soar high above the Earth's surface, we would see these two rivers as vivid lines of green snaking through the dusty land. The rivers Tigris and Euphrates form one arm of a geographical feature that has come to be known as the Fertile Crescent. This is an area of land roughly in the shape of a half-moon that runs from the marshlands of southern Iraq, north up the silt-rich rivers, then west to the humid coast of Syria. The Fertile Crescent continues south through the mountainous lands of Lebanon, down the Mediterranean coast of modern Israel and into Egypt, watered by the River Nile and its rich delta. Surrounded by high, treacherous mountains to the north and east, bounded by the Mediterranean Sea in the west and the impassable deserts of Arabia to the south, this sweeping corridor created the environment where some of the world's first great societies rose up. To us, the
He's stuck,
Assyrian
isn't he? I
Empire
know he's stuck.
feels like
Or he's
a
not.
relic of the impossibly distant past. But it's worth reminding ourselves that for them, their world was already ancient. The earliest settlements in this region, like the ones found at Göbekli Tepe and Çatalhöyük, are truly ancient, each between 12 and 9,000 years old. They are some of the first evidence we have of humans living in large societies after the end of the Ice Age. But the Assyrians also had an incredibly rich awareness of their own ancient history and the cultural roots of their society. Since the invention of writing by the Sumerians around the year 3200 BC, humans had been passing their knowledge down from generation to generation, and it's hard to overstate just how powerful this was. The Assyrians held on to the memory of several of the great kings of the Sumerian age, revering them as semi-mythical heroes. Among these was the legendary hero Gilgamesh, who slayed monsters and went on a quest to find the secret of eternal life. And they still told stories about the Akkadian king Sargon the Great, who, for the later Assyrians, had lived nearly 2 millennia in the past. For them, Sargon was about as distant in the past as Julius Caesar is for us. But his name was still on their lips. They still told stories about him, wrote about him, and drew inspiration from him, as this Middle Assyrian text called Sargon the King of Battle demonstrates.
While Sargon dwelt in the land, his heroes with him, 12 he chose. He brought his army across the fir-tree land. He conquered the cedar mountain. He took for his weapon the lightning bolt of his god.
Like the Sumerians before them, the Assyrians saw the ruins of ancient cities scattering their landscape and developed stories to explain how they got there. They believed that a great flood had once washed over the world, and that these ruined heaps of stone and brick were a remnant of this destructive ancient event. So I think it's worth reminding ourselves, right at the outset, that the Assyrians did not think of themselves as we might think of them, as an early culture at the dawn of human history, but as a people on the cutting edge of human progress, the product of a long and ancient line, and the culmination of all that humanity was capable of. Since the fall of the Sumerian Empire, the language of Akkadian had become the region's most common tongue, replacing the old Sumerian language. And the cities that had once formed part of the Sumerian empires had broken away. They were now a loose constellation of independent city-states, dotted up and down the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. Each city had their own king, their own army, and their own god. As we saw in episode 8, for much of the region's early history, the Akkadians had been something of a junior partner to their Sumerian cousins. But now, with the collapse of Sumer, the Akkadian cities of the north were finally free, and they set out on their own journeys. One of these cities was the city of Ashur. Ashur was occupied from at least the year 2500 BC. It was founded at the height of Sumerian rule, on a bank of the river Tigris in northern Iraq, about halfway between the modern cities of Tikrit and Mosul. Ashur was probably an early trading city. It would have been a town of tents and houses built from river clay, thatched with reeds. The smells of cattle and wood smoke would have drifted through its muddy streets. The sounds of people and the fluttering of the leaves of date palms, perhaps already the first canals being dug to water its fields. In its early days, it would have been a very humble place, and it would be hard to imagine the glorious legacy that its people would one day construct. Throughout the Sumerian period, the town of Ashur did well, and some of this was down to its natural advantages. It was nestled on a bend of the river Tigris that sheltered it on its north and east side, and its builders improved its natural defences with a system of strong buttressed walls that made it a strong fortress. The rivers of Mesopotamia were the land's lifeblood. They brought water for drinking and to irrigate the fields.
Why?
But
Like,
in the
what?
rough landscape,
Come on,
they
man.
also acted as the highways along which trade could move on barges and ships. Carvings of the time show long boats powered with oars, forging over the brown waters of the rivers, carrying wheat and barley, copper and tin, as well as fine woods and stone from the north. As a crucial stop along one of these rivers, Ashur soon grew to be a wealthy place. Excavations of its houses show that by the second millennium, many of them were spacious mansions. It became common for wealthy families to keep vaults beneath their floors to hide their many valuables, jewelry made of gold and polished brass, inlaid with semi-precious stones, like carnelian, agate, and the brilliant blue lapis lazuli. Excavations have even uncovered dozens of libraries and archives in the city, where texts written in cuneiform on clay tablets were stored, a clear indicator of a city overflowing with wealth. The wealthy families of Ashur were also able to donate handsomely to religious organizations, and the city would become home to no fewer than 34 temples to the various gods worshipped by all the people of Mesopotamia. Gods like the sun god Shamash, and the moon god Sin, the storm god Adad, Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, and of course, the king of the gods, Enlil.
Oh, this is
We can
nice.
imagine walking through the city
This is real
streets
nice.
at this time and hearing the incantations washing out of the temple doors and overlapping in the hot air, the priests of the different gods competing for attention in the crowded city, the ringing of bells and the banging of drums, the singing of hymns. Funeral processions may have floated past, chanting poetry such as this surviving devotional hymn to the Babylonian god Marduk.
The man who is departing in glory, may his soul shine radiant as brass. To that man may the sun give life, and Marduk, eldest son of heaven, grant him an abode of happiness.
The temples also performed services for the sick. If you visited the temple of Ishtar with an ailment, it's likely you would have heard something like this prayer being said over you by one of its priests.
Bind the sick man to heaven, for from the earth he is being torn away. Of the brave man, who was so strong, his strength has departed. In his bodily frame he lies dangerously ill. But Ishtar, who in her dwelling is grieved for him, descends from her mountain, unvisited of men. To the door of the sick man she comes.
And soon, like most cities of this time, the city of Ashur developed a god of its own. In fact, the city virtually became a god. In the religious systems of Mesopotamia, gods and cities had an intimate and
That was 100% on me. I was strafing the console. I think I should have just C'd up it. That was really bad.
Many of the duties that they do for us today, they could be called for in times
That was a good
of
grenade and
need
everything.
or given sacrifices to ward off evil.
That was my fault.
But at this time, each city also had a god, in the same way that every sports team has a mascot. The god
It's a near
was
frame
believed
perfect
to
trick.
quite literally live in the
Shoot that
highest
console.
chamber of the city's temple, often in a statue
I
dedicated
was
to
strafing
them.
though.
If you visited
Caught
another
me
city
strafing.
on business, it was considered sensible to give an offering to the city's god while you were there. And if two cities went to war, it was thought that their gods were battling it out in the heavens, just as their armies were fighting down on earth. And the more a city succeeded, the more power its god was presumed to have. As the city of Ashur grew in importance, its people named the city's god after the city itself, and so the god Ashur was born. Grand temples were thrown up to this new deity, and as the city went from strength to strength, worship of Ashur rose to become the highest form of religion for its people. This god rapidly took on new symbols and iconography. He became thought of as a robed man wearing a crown and holding a bow, often appearing in carvings at the center of a winged disc, looking down on the world and the golden city over which he presided. As the confidence of the cult of Ashur grew, eventually the position of Enlil as the king of the gods, a position he had held for 1,000 years, was in jeopardy. Over the next centuries, the god Ashur even took over Enlil's wife, the goddess Ninlil, and his sons Ninurta and Zababa. Ashur, and not Enlil, was now the supreme god for this city's people. The people of the city of Ashur would soon become known as Ashuraye, but today we call them Assyrians. Like many of the powerful cities of this region, for the next millennium or so, the Assyrians of the city of Ashur would make several attempts to found their own kingdom, and a number of times they succeeded. One great king named Shamshi-Adad ruled at the end of the 19th century BC, and he conquered large areas outside of Ashur, bringing back great wealth to the city. Under his reign, the people of Ashur built a grand royal palace, and the temple to the god Ashur was furnished with a ziggurat, an enormous stepped tower that in the Bronze Age was a statement of a city's membership to an elite and powerful club. But this early flourishing of Assyrian power was stamped out by the rival power of Babylon, a powerful city in the south that established its own empire under the famous king Hammurabi. This was the fate of the people of Ashur for much of the second millennium BC. They were able to rise a little bit before being swallowed up by a bigger fish. They were folded into the empires of Babylon, the Mitanni, and the Hittites, and would usually spend a century or so as a possession before throwing off their rulers and once more going it alone. But throughout this time, there was also a flourishing of Assyrian culture. One epic poem, known today as the Tukulti Ninurta epic, has survived from this time. It glorifies Assyrian military conquests in the south and sets out a model for how the ideal Assyrian king should behave. And it also contains a vision of the fierce, warlike spirit of the Assyrian people.
They charged forward furiously to the fray, without any armor. They had stripped off their breastplates, discarded their clothing. They tied up their hair and polished their weapons. The fierce, heroic men danced with sharpened weapons. They blasted at one another like struggling lions, with eyes flashing. Particles drawn in a whirlwind swirled around in combat. Death, as if on a day of thirsting, slakes itself at the sight of the warrior.
But as the second millennium BC drew to a close, around the years 1200 to 1150 BC, the Assyrians would face a challenge of astonishing magnitude. The period that followed has gone down in history with the name the Bronze Age collapse. As we saw in our second episode, for reasons we still don't entirely understand, a wave of destruction would soon wash over this region. Hordes of a mysterious force known as the Sea Peoples would land on its shores. Famine would spread from city to city. This destruction would sweep whole civilizations off the map and leave virtually no inhabited cities left in the eastern Mediterranean region. Only two great societies emerged on the other side of this destruction. One was Egypt. As we saw in our second episode, the Egyptians managed to stop the Sea Peoples in a daring ambush on the waters of the Nile Delta, and just about held their society together. And the other was Assyria. It survived by withdrawing from its recent conquests and holding on to only those territories that were essential to keeping its trade routes open. It withdrew back to its heartland and survived in a diminished form. But as the wave of destruction ended, the challenges that Assyria faced were enormous, as the historian Georges Roux recounts.
Towards the end of the 10th century BC, Assyria was at her lowest ebb. Economic collapse was impending. She had lost all her possessions west of the Tigris, and her vital arteries, the great trade routes that ran through the mountain passes, were in foreign lands. Hostile highlanders occupied not only the heights of the Zagros, but the foothills down to the edge of the Tigris Valley, while Aramaean tribes pitched their tents almost at the gates of Ashur.
At this time, Assyria's territory consisted of little more than a strip of land along the river Tigris, surrounded on all sides by determined enemies. But there were also things to be thankful for. For one thing, Assyria's enemies seemed incapable of uniting.
Why?
For much of this history, they hated each other as much as they hated the Assyrians, and this would prove crucial for Assyrian survival. In the flat plains of Iraq, Assyria had no natural boundaries or defenses. For its survival, it relied on the fact that its enemies could be dealt with one by one. The powerful Assyrian army could march one way, then the other, smashing each enemy in turn, and subsequent kings would do everything they could to ensure that this continued to be the case. The main cities of Assyria were also virtually untouched by the disaster of the Bronze Age collapse, and they continued their economic output throughout the crisis. Assyria still had chariots and horses and weapons. It had access to iron, the new metal that had been used for ceremonial and decorative objects for centuries, but was only just beginning to be used to forge weapons and armor. The introduction of iron meant that Assyria was no longer dependent on the fragile supply of copper that came to them from across the mountains in the faraway mines of Afghanistan. Iron occurs 10 times more commonly in the Earth's crust than copper, and could be found just about anywhere. The warriors of Assyria had been trained by years of constant fighting, and were now among the best in the world. And perhaps most importantly, the line of royal succession had supposedly not been broken for more than 200 years, meaning that the kings of Assyria claimed to draw on an ancient and unchallenged legitimacy among their people. In this region at the time, no other state could say the same. And to at least one Assyrian king, it must have seemed clear that if Assyria could only seize its opportunity, it could become a power unlike any that had been seen before. That man's name was Tiglath-Pileser I.
Like, why? It's just so dumb, man.
Tiglath-Pileser ascended to the throne in the year 1114 BC. He was the son of a harsh ruler named Ashur-resh-ishi I. His father had been remorseless in his campaigns, giving himself the title the Avenger of Assyria and merciless hero of battle. One surviving edict by his father declares that the penalty for fraternizing with palace women was to be thrown into an oven, and it's clear that Tiglath-Pileser inherited at least some of his father's harsh reputation. A series of laws was written during his reign called the Middle Assyrian Law Code, and they included incredibly harsh punishments against women. In one, a married woman who has an affair is decreed to be killed. But he was an energetic ruler and a skillful campaigner. One of his royal inscriptions describes him in the following manner.
Unrivaled king of the universe, king of the four kingdoms, king of all princes, lord of lords, whose weapons the god Ashur has sharpened, and whose name he has pronounced eternally for control of the four quarters. Splendid flame which covers the hostile land like a rainstorm.
This kind of overflowing self-praise is quite typical of how all Assyrian kings described themselves. But in the case of Tiglath-Pileser, it's clear that the challenges he faced were indeed formidable. He had inherited an Assyria that was threatened on multiple fronts. In the north, climate shifts had been driving nomadic horsemen into the northern plains. The Mushku people of Syria had occupied certain Assyrian districts in the upper Euphrates Valley. the Hittite people had also snatched some of its territory, and the powerful rival of Babylon still lay to the south. But Tiglath-Pileser didn't waste any time. He attacked the Mushku first and conquered them, and then drove out the Hittites and Aramaeans. And everywhere he went, he placed a record of his victories. In one of the strong fortresses he built along his border, he engraved the following message on a series of copper plates in the base of the walls.
Altogether, I conquered 42 lands and their rulers. From the other side of the lower Zab in distant mountainous regions to the other side of the Euphrates, people of Hatti, and the upper sea in the west.
The king Tiglath-Pileser also loved to hunt, and he delighted in bringing back live specimens of animals from the faraway lands that he campaigned in.
I killed 10 strong bull elephants in the land Haran, in the region of the river Habor, and 4 live elephants I captured. I brought the hides and tusks of the dead elephants, along with the live elephants, back to my city of Ashur.
Just a party.
It's hard to know how the average
It's a Moonraker
Syrian
party up in here.
citizen of the time would have felt about all of this, since their accounts were not recorded. We can imagine that at the very
Moonraker
least,
3.
a great deal of wealth would now be flowing into the city of Ashur.
When I was growing up in multiplayer, I would always choose Moonraker Elite, the man,
Been working
the
day
second
and
list
night
person in
to
the
build new
list of
palaces and
multiplayer
gardens
characters.
in the city. Exotic,
Just because
never
I just
before
found it
seen
so troll
animals
that the guy
might
is
now be
dressed like a
seen on the
banana.
streets, while access
His
to
yellow
new trade
jumpsuit.
routes may have meant that
It's
new
just so troll.
spices and fabrics would have begun to appear in the city markets.
And the guy I think if I remember right, the guy kind of looked like me, but I might be wrong.
Tiglath-Pileser
Just
swept
smirk,
his
this like
Assyrian armies west,
dumb banana
and
guy
when he
smirk.
conquered the Hittite town of
But then my
Pitru,
friends
he gained
complained because we would
control
play a
of the
lot
highway
on
to the Mediterranean
Stack, which
Sea.
was the
A
top
distant
of the
body
of the
water
library.
that, for the Assyrians,
Right?
constituted one
And they said that they
edge of the
couldn't
entire
see me.
world.
It's just bullshit. You
Assyria at
just
this
got
time
trolled too
was
much,
the only
motherfuckers.
great power in this region.
They said it
with
was hard
no
to see
access
the
to coastline.
Moonraker on
And we
the
can see
stack, so
something
they
of
forced
a
me to
wonder
choose a different
in the
character.
King Tiglath-Pileser's
Whatever.
words,
Get
when he
fucked.
boasts about going on board a ship for the first time. The Assyrian chronicles even record that he hunted and killed some kind of sea creature known as a Nahiru.
I killed a Nahiru, which is called Horse of the Sea, in the Great Sea of the
I
land.
think the Moonraker is
of
even a
Amun.
little taller. The Moonraker might be a
We
little
don't know
tiny bit
what
taller.
this
Get
animal
fucked.
was.
Saying you
Many
can't see me.
believe it may have
Fuck
been
you.
a dolphin or a whale, while others say it was likely a hippopotamus. But it shows what a novelty it was for the king of the landlocked kingdom of Assyria to finally reach the water. Tiglath-Pileser died in the year 1076 BC, and on his deathbed he must have looked back on a life of staggering success. During his violent rule, Assyria recovered much of the territory that it had lost over the period of the Bronze Age collapse. He had grown his kingdom into an empire that was all but unmatched in the region, and he must have looked ahead to the dawning of a golden age for Assyria. But the fortunes of Assyria would soon change for good, with the reign of a king named Adad-Nirari II.
Man, my stick is so worn out now. The stick was so perfect a year ago. It's so worn out now.
Adad-Nirari was crowned in the year 910.
I need to get her
BC,
like a steel bowl or something. I really do.
3,000 years ago. And it's worth mentioning that his reign is perhaps the first event in the entirety of
I might just
Near
open this and
Eastern
clean it up.
history that can be dated to an exact year
No, the
with
stick is
100%
fucked.
confidence. The Assyrians, like the peoples before them, didn't keep track of years with numbers like
Why?
we do. Instead, they gave each year a name. sometimes named after a particular person as a kind of honor, or named after a significant event that had taken place, like a great battle or an eclipse of the sun. Assyrian scribes kept long, meticulous lists of these year names, along with brief notes about important events that had taken place, as the following example shows, corresponding to 3 years at the end of the 8th century BC.
The year of Chamberlain Tabsharasur, the city of Dua-Sharukin was founded. The year of Shamash-Upahir, governor of Haburi.
Is this
Kuruman
AI?
was conquered and a governor was appointed. The year of Shah
Text-to-speech?
Dabu, governor of Tushan. The king returned from Babylon, the vizier and nobles. The loot of Dua-Jakin was destroyed on the 22nd of Teshrit. The gods of Dua-Sharukin entered the temples.
This system worked well enough for people of the time, but it means that if a modern historian wants to work out the date of a particular event, they need to have an unbroken list of year names, and for that list to include a known historical event, or an astronomical event that can be clearly dated, like a solar eclipse. Luckily for us, the Assyrians were obsessed with eclipses, believing them to be important omens from the gods, and they kept incredibly careful note of any that occurred. And the reign of Adad-nirari is the beginning of the earliest one of these lists. He was an ambitious king, and he soon began to expand in all directions, into what is today Turkey, Iran, and the Mediterranean coast, drawing on the strength of the formidable Assyrian army. The life of an Assyrian soldier was a tough one. Adad-nirari's armies were made up primarily of men drawn from the fields. They would spend much of their year working on farmsteads with their families, digging canals and turning the dusty earth with plows and hand tools, growing beans and pulses, wheat and barley, raising livestock like sheep, pigs and cattle. And then when the spring came, the rains stopped and the winter mud hardened across the land, they would be gathered up, given a spear and a shield made of woven reeds, and marched up into the rocky hills and into the barren desert to fight for the empire. Sometimes they would fight other settled societies who lived in walled towns. Other times, their opponents would be nomadic tribesmen, or even other Assyrians who had rebelled. It must have been a confusing and frightening experience for these men, and no doubt many despised being forced into this service. But perhaps there were also those who enjoyed it. Without these annual excursions, many of them may never have seen a mountain or an ocean, or anything of the world outside their town or village. And since the Assyrian army tended to win more than it lost, there must have been a certain sense of pride in their shared accomplishments. This rhythm of a season of harvest in the autumn and a season of war in the spring formed the heartbeat of the Assyrian Empire. It was a drumbeat of expansion and conquest that was continued by the king who came to the throne in the year 883 BC, and who would carry the Assyrian Empire to new and unprecedented heights. His name was Ashur-nasirpal II. Ashur-nasirpal was a remorseless and ruthless warrior, and many of the things we associate today with the kings of Assyria, their
Yo, what's up, Cloud9? What's up, man? How you doing, man?
A climax.
What's up, homie? Hope you're doing well, my dude.
Much like many rulers of this time,
What is up, my friend?
It's clear that he used terror tactics and tortuous methods.
Yeah, the early stream, dude.
To drive
for my Euro homies.
Of his enemies.
Exactly,
but
man.
His inscriptions Out of all
How are you, buddy?
those of the kings of Assyria,
Dude, I
who
maxed
stands
out my
out
my
for the delight they seem
my
to
ads
take in the
now.
details of these
So
characters.
sorry if you watch ads, and thank you.
After crushing one
It's
rebellion to his rule, Ashurnazirpal
thank you, nice.
commissioned this
You know,
inscription
since we
describing
talked about
what
Twitch and
happened
ads and
next.
everything, ad revenue, I maxed out my
learned
ads,
many captives.
and my revenue I got for on Monday.
From some, I cut off their arms
I
and
streamed for
hands.
11 hours. I
From
streamed
others, I
2
cut off their
streams of
noses,
GoldenEye
ears, and extremities.
and one
I
of
gouged out
the
eyes of
weightlifting.
many troops.
I streamed 11
I made one
hours. I
pile of the
made
living
in ads
and one
$3 and like 20
I hung
cents
their heads on trees around the city.
for one
I
day
burnt their
in
adolescent
ads.
boys and girls. I raised,
Well, I mean, which is not,
destroyed,
you know, it's not
burnt,
like
and consumed
spectacular,
the city.
but it's way. I'm trying to stream like every day, kind of long hours.
In the short term, Ashurnazirpal
You know what I mean?
was an effective
Miss you, how's it going on Latrina today?
New
Thanks, buddy.
conquests were turned into client
Miss me?
states,
Aw, that's so
and
nice, man. I
ordered
miss
to
you,
pay
Cloud9. I was
tribute
thinking
to
about
the
you.
Assyrian
Mine
Empire.
too.
Enormous
Extra.
wealth
Yeah.
began to flow once again
Yeah, man.
into
I
the
mean,
imperial
it's
center,
the
and
only way. I mean, I
Ashurnazirpal
appreciate people that
celebrated his victories
stay here,
with the
watch the ads. I
construction
recommend
of
ad
even more
blocker.
grand
But even if
palaces.
people, I just want people to know that them watching the ads really kind of actually does help me right now. And if I can just kind of improve my viewer count, even just if people keep the tabs open in the background, that'd be amazing. People just, if literally someone keeps the tabs open in the background, they make the viewer money. I might put that in my stream title. Want to help me out for free? Literally, just keep keep my tab open in the background. You agree? Yeah. We really need some unity because it's free. That's literally free. That's not. There's nothing obnoxious asking that, right?
This policy of
If you want to help me out,
in Assyria
just keep it
wasn't
open in the
new,
background.
But Ashurnazirpal seems to have employed it far
On
more
mute.
frequently than his predecessors. The Assyrians understood. a
But I
very
mean,
simple
to be honest, I think it's
calculation in the
insignificant.
world, that the
Maybe a couple
population
people will do that if I
size
request
meant
that, which
power.
will, I mean, it will be
They
significant through
quite
time, but
happily filled their cities with people from all
Thanks, buddy.
corners of their empire.
again, we need a
They
union, man.
created what must have been some of
We were
the most
thinking, recalled it.
cosmopolitan
We
urban
came up,
environments
dude,
in
Kaido's,
all
and
corners
we
of
came up with a name,
Asia.
and I think with Anomaly too.
It must have been like
You
when he's conquered
Unite.
to be
This is the name of the
uprooted from
app.
their villages
The
and
Union
deposited unceremoniously in the vast metropolitan cities
Unite.
of the Assyrian heartland. Larger
The
than any
Union
town
Uniter.
ever
Across
seen,
companies, people
and
join
where
and they search for the
hundreds of
company,
languages would have
and
been
then they
heard
sign
in
the union. And we make it an app.
The Assyrians also used deportations and relocations in a much more punitive way. And this policy
The
also
sound
reached its height
on
under
tabbed
Ashurnazirpal.
window. Oh, really?
Deportation
No
may
freaking way.
sound like
Are
something
you
of a
serious,
light
dude?
punishment when
Like, why
compared to
why
the
don't I
fates
just
of
have
some of those
one of my
restored
tabs
to the
open
way
here
of
now
the
too?
kings of
Could I
Assyria?
make money off the
But
same
it
IP
was a
address?
brutally effective tactic for crushing
Jeff Union.
resistance to the empire. Human
I heard
beings
Twitch
during
made
this time
$2.8 billion
and throughout
last year or
history
something.
are so
$2.8 billion.
connected
What,
that
does
this
that
kind
go
of
to the staff? Who does that
uprising
go
had
to?
a devastating
Is that
psychological
after? Is
impact on
that
the
net
peoples it
profit?
was done to. This technique of mass
$2.8 billion. When a
so
company says they make that money, does that
effective
mean
that
that
it's
goes to
been
the
employed by
CEO?
modern dictators. Joseph
Or is that
Stalin
after
famously
salaries?
deported at least 6 million people in the 20th century from more than 20
Because I mean, how many affiliates do you think there are? Let's do the
considered to
math,
be
dude. I'm glad you're here, man.
And in the early days
Through
of the
2.8,
American
but I
colonies,
had to spin on.
when
Ha.
indigenous people were taken as slaves,
But was it worth
they
it?
were always transported to another region to break their relationship with the land and reduce their chance of escaping. Whether despite
Well, let me show you something Cloud9 that I think you'll like. I know you're a big World Knife fan, but check this out too, my man.
did manage to keep the empire
It was worth it, man. Yo,
and
that's
dramatically
a sick
expanded.
emote. What is
But he
that?
was followed by his son, a man named Shalmaneser
That's a
III,
package?
who would not be so capable.
That's like a friggin'
Shalmaneser
Aztec
enthusiastically
illegal
continued his father's policies of
relic
aggressive expansion and mass
the Cubans
deportation.
brought over.
But in the final years of his reign, the people of Assyria had had enough. An enormous rebellion led by his son broke out across the entire empire. 27 cities, including the city of Ashur, rose up in rebellion. And this long and bitter civil war allowed virtually all of the people that Ashurnazirpal had conquered to shake off Assyrian rule. Assyria's heavy-handed military domination of the region had made them hated, and it was clear that if they hoped to ever build a lasting empire, something would have to change. One king named
Yes, yo,
Tiglath-Pileser
check this
III
out, bro.
thought he knew what that thing was.
I have a story about this. I bought this, I think, for $15 in 2005, 2006.
He decided, in characteristic
2007?
Assyrian fashion, that what the empire needed was a much more powerful army. Up until the middle of the 8th century BC, the Assyrian
Real
army
OG copy,
was
yeah,
much
bro.
the
Oh my
same
god,
as
dude.
any other force
Look
in
at
the region.
this. What?
Only a
Get
good
the fuck
deal
out of here,
larger.
my man.
And the numbers really are staggering for the time. Shalmaneser III, the son of Ashurnazirpal, once boasted a force of 120,000 men at a time when the world population has been estimated at only 50 million. If his inscriptions are to be believed, then at
Yeah,
that time,
and dude,
around
that I bought it at the
0.25%
Eaton Center, and it was
or
brought up in the
1/11
CU
of the
podcast,
world's
the completely
entire
unnecessary
population
podcast. Oh, dude, look
was
at this
that
poster.
time serving in the Assyrian army.
Nostalgia.
But it was still a force made up of virtually untrained peasants. The only professional soldiers were bodyguards that protected the king and other nobles. But these were mostly deployed in the cities and palaces, and rarely saw battle. The vast bulk of the Assyrian
Anyways.
army was made up of farmers,
What's it called?
who, as we've seen, were plucked from their lands whenever the need
Just stop
arose,
being a creeper.
following the heartbeat of the seasons. Although the Empire could summon a vast horde of soldiers, it was an ineffective force. When
Love the
Assyrian
Archive
ran
City, yeah.
and the barley grew golden
Oh,
in
I got the
fields,
receipt.
these armies of
When did I
farmers
buy this
had to
game?
march right back home
$15.
and bring
What?
in the
I'm not
crop.
even lying, bro.
Otherwise, the people
Bro.
of the Empire would go hungry. Gathering this huge army from the fields was an immensely time-consuming and
$15. I got the receipt right here. When did I buy it? 2006. Eaton Center.
If one occurred in some far corner of the empire, the Assyrians had to wait until summer.
Oh, it's EB Games. I got it at EB Games. I got it like at the Canadian Game Stock. Stop for $15.
Another month or two to march across the region to face
Total pre-played savings was $10. Apparently, you can buy it new for $25 at that
and the
time.
men would have to march all the way back
Canadian.
home. If
Dang,
they were
dude.
clever, a rebellious city
That's
could simply lock
hilarious.
its gates
Can't believe we still
and
have
wait
this.
behind their walls for the armies
And in
of
the book?
Assyria to go away. And in many cases, this is exactly what they did. But in the year 745 BC, the king
Yes, then.
Tiglath-Pileser came to the
Oh
throne.
man. Oh bro.
He chose his royal name after the king who had brought Assyria to such greatness more than 3 centuries before, who had forged a path to the Mediterranean.
Okay, some cool pictures and adverts. And no way, you know that? That's hilarious. I don't think I've ever even opened
And
it.
this new king,
I think I just played the game.
Tiglath-Pileser, engaged in a radical program
Insane.
of reforming the
Oh, they have
Assyrian
all the
military
radio
into
stations.
perhaps the first truly modern army. He reformed the core of the military into a body of elite armored
Dude.
troops, cavalry and chariots.
Love
And
fist.
he demanded that conquered territories on the edges of the empire supplied all of the army's light infantry, who were considered expendable and often bore the brunt of the casualties. The Assyrian army
White
also
theme,
pioneered
green,
the
no
use
way.
of a large engineering component to its fighting force.
Oh, no way.
Assyrian soldiers could build bridges and dig tunnels,
Jesus
construct
Christ, shark
fortifications
attacks.
and siege engines,
Oh yeah, the white cop
as
car.
well as maintain the supply lines needed to keep an army going. This combined
That's some
fighting
lore right
force
there.
of soldiers and engineers was similar to the formula that would make the Roman military so formidable 7 centuries in the future. Assyrian carvings show remarkably detailed scenes of the army crossing one of the land's great rivers, something they must have had to do
Oh, here's
multiple
Cloud9 right
times
here.
a year. We see Assyrian men blowing into tied-up sheepskins to
The guy
inform
on the
them
moped,
and use
starting out the
emergency
runs.
aids.
Oh, sorry,
Cannons
3 of
dismantled
7?
and
No.
turned into boats.
No.
Rafts constructed to transport supplies and equipment. Army engineers could even cut paths through the treacherous mountains, as this inscription, written by the late Assyrian king Sargon II, seems particularly proud of.
Mount Cimmeria is a great mountain peak that points upward like the blade of a spear. Its summit touches the sky above, and its roots are made to reach down below into the netherworld. It is not fit for the ascent of chariotry or for allowing horses, and its access is very difficult for even the passage of foot soldiers. I had my vanguard carry strong copper axes. They cut through the high mountain crags as if they were limestone, and thereby improved the path. I took the lead of my army and made the chariotry, cavalry, and battle troops fly over the mountain as if they were brave eagles. I had the common soldiers and light infantry follow behind them. The camels and donkeys bearing the baggage leapt up its peaks like the ibexes native to the mountains. I had the numerous troops of the god Asher ascend its difficult slopes in a good order, and then I set up camp on top of that mountain.
Tiglath-Pileser also increased production of iron in the empire. It was a small-scale industrial revolution. Assyrian cities of this time must have become increasingly smoke-filled, the furnaces belching charcoal smoke, the sound of billows and clanging hammers echoing off the buildings. The use of iron allowed the Assyrians to enter the era of true mass production. Assyrians could now use iron to make
Back from ads now.
knives,
Yo, I found the
pins,
cop car,
and
dude.
chains,
Cop
while
car's here.
Assyrian soldiers now marched with iron
Sorry, man.
swords,
Thanks, buddy.
iron spear blades, iron helmets, and iron scales sewn into their tunics. The effect was immediate. In the year 743 BC, only 2 years after coming to the throne,
That's
King
some awesome
Tiglath-Pileser
lore. That's some awesome
marched
lore you
north
shared right
against
there.
the
The
kingdom
Vice
of
City
Urartu
lore.
and conquered it easily. 2 years later, he marched west into Syria
7.
against the kingdom of Arpad.
Underneath, insane.
The people of the city of Arpad had
What's-
fought the Assyrians
Oh,
before,
crazy. That's so
and
cool, man.
they knew what to do.
Goldeneye set about it. That's
They would
awesome, dude.
simply
Doing what?
move
What were
their
you setting up?
and hold tight.
Goldeneye?
The Assyrian
But
army
why? How?
may have looked fearsome, but they knew that when the summer came to an end, they would have to go home and harvest their fields, just
Thanks,
as they
man. I'm
always
using watch.
had. But as autumn came, the people of Arpad must have
Nice,
realized
man. Yeah,
that
dude.
something
Fun
was
times,
wrong.
man.
The Assyrians showed no
Fun
sign
times.
of going home. In fact, it looked like they were settling in for a long stay. Tiglath-Pileser lay siege to the city of Arpad for 3 years, something that would have been impossible with the old seasonal armies. When the city finally fell, the Assyrian king ordered Arpad to be destroyed and its inhabitants slaughtered. It was a clear message to all those who stood in the empire's way that a new age was dawning. Much like superpowers today, the Assyrian Empire treated the areas outside its boundaries as zones of extraction, where life was cheap, and all that mattered was the empire's continued access to their resources. and Assyria would grow rich from the vast wealth it extracted from these areas. One text, written during the reign of that cruel king Ashurnasirpal II, lists all the wealth drawn from a single campaign of terror against the region of Bitsamani.
Yo, there's a cool link that Joris posted in the Elite. I'll paste it here. It's pretty cool.
460 harness-trained horses,
3D images of each level. I'm sure you
100
found them.
talents of tin, 100 talents of bronze, 300 talents of iron, 3,000 bronze receptacles, bronze bowls, bronze containers, 1,000 linen garments with multicolored trim, dishes, chests, couches of ivory and decorated with gold, the treasure of his palace. Also 2,000 oxen, 5,000 sheep, his sister with her rich dowry, and the daughters of his nobles.
On top of this, 15,000 slaves were rounded up and brought back to Assyria to labor in manual jobs and provide a workforce for the empire. In campaign after campaign, Tiglath-Pileser conquered lands in Syria and marched all the way down the Mediterranean coast, taking coastal cities all the way to Egypt. He invaded the northern kingdom of Israel, destroyed their army, installed a puppet king, and deported large numbers of Hebrew tribes back to lands in Assyria. And Tiglath-Pileser also added one more remarkable new possession to the list of Assyrian conquests. That was the mighty and ancient capital of the south, the great city of Babylon.
Cool.
The city of Babylon had been the political and religious heart of southern Mesopotamia for more than 1,000 years. It was perhaps the most ancient and revered great city in the region, and at this time it ruled over an area known today as Babylonia. This is a landscape of marshes, covering much of the south of what is today Iraq, on the coast of the Persian Gulf. This was once the largest wetland in the Middle East, home to countless rare species of bird, and the reeds often grow so high that you can't see over them. Mesopotamia had once been divided between the Sumerians in the south and the Akkadians in the north. But this had now evolved to become Babylonians in the south and Assyrians in the north. And it's a cultural division that still exists today. In modern times, the distribution of the Sunni and Shia regions of modern Iraq roughly follow this same geographical divide. Babylon was the largest city in the world at several points in history, and it was perhaps the first city to ever reach a population above 200,000. Today, its awe-inspiring ruins sit about 85 kilometers south of Baghdad, a sprawling mass of crumbling walls. Its famous Ishtar Gate, with its ornate blue glazed tiles, its depictions of oxen, lions, and dragons, were at this time still several centuries in the future. But Babylon would have still been a resplendent city, glittering in the sun. And Tiglath-Pileser's conquest of Babylon shifted the balance of power in Mesopotamia. By the year 736 BC, the empire encompassed almost the whole of the region known as the Fertile Crescent. It now formed an unbroken corridor from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, linking up the trade routes of the Indian Ocean with those of North Africa and Europe. Its roads would have been thick with caravans of donkeys and camels, its rivers full of barges, carrying spices and precious stones, wheat, barley and fruit, gold, and silver and brass. It was this empire, and the formidable army it now commanded, that the king Tiglath-Pileser III would pass down to his younger son, who would found the greatest dynasty of the Assyrian age. His name was Sargon II, named after that great ancient Sumerian hero. His dynasty would be known as the Sargonid Kings. They would rule for 3 generations that would form the highest point of the empire's achievements in war, art, and literature. But they would also be the twilight of its age. And when these 3 generations ended, the empire would finally collapse in ash and flame. At this point, I think it's worth pausing and asking, what was life like for the average citizen of the Assyrian Empire? Due to their officious record keeping, we actually have a great deal of detail about how the people of ancient Mesopotamia lived. Like the Sumerians, the Assyrians wrote on clay tablets, which is lucky for us since it has made their texts incredibly durable. An enormous number of these pieces of writing have been recovered, so many that an estimated 90% have still never been looked at by a trained expert, and far less translated. The experience of reading these tablets is like hearing the babbling of countless voices speaking up to us from the impossibly distant past about a remarkable array of everyday matters. Just one out of countless examples is this letter from a child away at school, complaining to his mother that the other children have nicer clothes than he does.
Tell the Lady Zinu, her son, Idinsin, sends the following message. From year to year, the clothes of the young gentlemen here become better, but you let my clothes get worse from year to year. The son of Adad Idinam, whose father is only an assistant of my father, has 2 new sets of clothes, while you fuss even about a single set for me. In spite of the fact that you gave birth to me, and his mother only adopted him, his mother loves him, while you do not love me.
As a result of this rich collection of texts, we can paint a remarkably clear picture of what life was like for these very ancient people. Walking the streets of a great Assyrian city during this time would have engaged every one of your senses. One such city was Nineveh, which would soon become the capital of the empire, the same city that the Greek writer Xenophon would one day pass by while fleeing from the Persian army pursuing him. Nineveh was an enormous city for the time. Its city walls were 12 kilometers long, built of a stone foundation surmounted by mud bricks, and enclosing an area of 7.5 square kilometers. The wall was broken by 15 gates, many of them named after gods, such as the Adad Gate, named after the god of storms, or the Shamash Gate, after the god of the sun, while others carried more descriptive names, like the Desert Gate, or the Gate of the Water Carriers. The city was surrounded by a moat, filled with water from the river Tigris. The city would have been a kaleidoscope of rooftops, built in a largely unplanned manner, and its alleyways would have been covered with mats and reed awnings to keep off the heat, much as they still are in Iraq today. In the courtyards of houses, skins of wine and jars of water hang from the rafters to cool. We can imagine a joint of meat boiling in a clay pot on a fireplace, the smells of baking bread wafting from a clay charcoal oven nearby. The following recipe for lamb stew, translated from a clay tablet, shows the kinds of smells that would have been wafting through the city streets in the afternoon.
Stew of lamb. Meat is used, You prepare water. You add fat. You add fine-grained salt, dried barley cakes, onion, shallot, and milk. You crush together and add leek and garlic.
Like the Sumerians before them, the Assyrians loved to drink beer. They drank it in groups, sipping it from large urns through hollow reed straws. Beer held a prominent place in Assyrian culture, and this inscription by the late king Ashurbanipal shows that even in the highest royal circles, it was considered among life's greatest pleasures.
In my reign there is prosperity. In my years there is abundance. My kingship is good as the choicest oil. Good beer I have placed in my palace.
Nineveh sat on the river Tigris and had a bustling dock and waterfront beside the gate known as the Dock Gate. This would have been a vibrant place, full of the smells of dried and fresh fish, stagnant water and mud, the babbling of the crowd, people arguing over prices and shouting greetings in dozens of languages. Merchants would sail downstream on barges or ships woven from reeds, perhaps travelling south to Ashur or Babylon, with clay urns full of beer or wine. The following letter contains instructions from a wine merchant to a friend.
Yeah, man, I maxed it out. I'm
Tell
sorry.
Ahuni, Balaam sends the following message. May the god Shamash keep you in good health. Make ready for me the myrtle and the sweet-smelling reeds I spoke to you about, as well as a boat for transporting wine. Buy and bring along with you 10 silver shekels worth of wine, and join me here in Babylon sometime tomorrow.
But the Tigris was a fast-flowing river, much faster than the Euphrates, and sailing back upstream was very difficult. So traders would often make the journey back by road, accompanied by caravans of donkeys. The road system was now much improved since the time of the Sumerians, and a sophisticated highway network now joined all of Assyria's major cities, with milestones at regular intervals telling travelers how much further they had to go. But the roads were often dangerous, and although soldiers would patrol them, banditry was extremely common. One letter from a local governor shows his frustration with the lack of response to the bandit problem.
Tell Sin Idinam, Sili sends the following message. I have written to you repeatedly to bring here the criminal and all the robbers, but you have not brought them. And so fires started by the robbers are still raging and ravaging the countryside. I am holding you responsible for the crimes which are committed in the country.
In the cities, a great deal of life took place on the roofs of houses. During the day, women would gather on these roofs to perform the duties of maintaining their homes. They would pound grains into flour and knead the dough to make bread, prepare food, wash linen and hang it out to dry. We can imagine them talking with their neighbours from roof to roof as they worked, and the sounds of their laughter drifting overhead. During the hottest hours of the day, with the Iraqi sun often reaching more than 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit, the heat would drive everyone indoors. The finer houses of the city often had a kind of cool room with a floor made of polished alabaster or marble and the walls painted with plaster. During the hottest parts of the day, the floor and walls would be splashed with water to cool the air inside. The city's poor would sleep on reed mats, while the rich had wooden bed frames with mattresses and coverings. The richest of the citizens had beds made of ivory and fine carved woods. And it's not just people that were thought to live in this city. The Assyrians believed that the world was populated by countless demons and spirits, who could not be seen or heard, but whose influence could constantly be felt, and who often manifested as bad smells. These demons were responsible for illnesses and disease, and they required the constant attention of exorcists to expel them. The following letter recounts the procedure for one exorcism for a person suffering from epilepsy.
As soon as something has afflicted him, the exorcist rises and hangs a mouse and a shoot of thorn bush on the vault of the patient's door. The exorcist dresses in a red garment and puts on a red cloak. He holds a raven on his right arm, a falcon on his left, and recites the incantation, "Truly, you are evil." After he has finished, he makes another exorcist go around the bed of the patient, followed by incense and a torch, and recites the incantation, "Begone, evil Hutupu," until the demon is driven out. He does this every morning and evening.
Talismans were often used to ward off these evil spirits, often small statues in bronze or clay, sometimes precious stones like jasper. They were often frightening images of demons, with the wings and heads of goats and dogs, and the tails of scorpions. And these would be kept in every corner of the house to ward off evil. As you walked the city, you would see these small talismans hanging from the rooftops. For many Assyrians, one crucial everyday object was what's called a cylinder seal. These were a small cylinder of stone, some no larger than a battery, which had complicated designs and symbols carved into them. The idea was that someone could prove their identity using this seal, and they could be used to sign contracts, just like a signature. People would wear them around their necks on a string, and when a contract was written on clay, they would roll the cylinder over it so that their unique image was left printed on it. You could even seal a chest, an urn, or a door using clay or wax, and then print it with an official seal, so that everyone knew the last person to open it. The following letter of instruction to a member of the king's household shows the importance that these seals held in all manners of official business.
Tell Manaya that Sikialani will be coming to you carrying the cylinder seals to reseal the entrance of the warehouse, and also the cylinder showing a Lamu monster for resealing the chests. Get everyone together, open the storehouse, and take as many as you can carry of the garments which are in the chests under my seal. Put your cylinder seal on whatever has been returned, and send me back the seal cylinders.
But these cylinders were expensive, and they signified that their holder was an important person of high class. Regular people had to get by without one, and to sign a contract, they would simply press their fingernails into the clay, meaning that the marks of these ancient people's hands are still left on some of these documents. The people who lived these countless lives in the streets of the great Assyrian cities were probably largely unaware of what was going on in the vast grand palaces that loomed over their cities. They would have likely followed the comings and goings of kings with some interest, the way we might pay attention to celebrity gossip. But to them, the inner workings of the royal palace would have been as inaccessible and mysterious as the center of the earth. But what happened in those inner chambers would have an enormous effect on their lives. And as that final great dynasty of Assyria, the Sargonid kings, took to the throne, the dramas of the royal court would soon have deadly consequences for all those who called Assyria their home. The drama of the Sargonid kings truly begins with the son of Sargon, a man named Sennacherib. He came to the throne in the year 705 BC, and he would begin one of the most remarkable family dramas to come down to us from the ancient world. And he would be the father and the grandfather of the last two great kings of Assyria, Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal. This great drama got off to a remarkably rocky start. Sennacherib's father, Sargon, had been a respected and feared king, but it's clear that something about Sennacherib meant that he didn't quite hold the same level of command. After only 2 years of his rule, several Assyrian vassals in the foothills to the east, in Syria and along the Mediterranean coast, all suddenly stopped paying their tribute to the empire. The Egyptians, always happy to throw sand in the eyes of the Assyrians, moved to back the rebels' fight for independence, and the young Sennacherib quickly found himself plunged into a fight for the empire's survival. The young king quickly gathered the full force of the imperial army and dealt with the rebel kings in the usual Assyrian fashion, taking them on one by one. He first marched east and crushed the peoples of the Iranian lowlands. Then he marched north and around the Fertile Crescent to the Mediterranean coast and reconquered the rebellious kingdoms there, as he recalls in the following inscription.
With the weapons of the god Ashur, my lord, and my fierce battle array, I turned them back and made them retreat. I quickly slaughtered and defeated the king of the land of Elam, together with his magnates who wore gold jewelry like fattened bulls, restrained with chains. I slit their throats like sheep and cut off their precious lives like thread. Like a flood after a rainstorm, I made their blood flow over the broad earth. The swift horses, harnessed to my chariot, pulled into floods of their blood. The wheels of my war chariot, which lays criminals and villains low, were bathed in blood and gore. I filled the plain with the corpses of their warriors like grass. I cut off their lips, I cut off their hands, like the stems of cucumbers in season.
One of these campaigns is remarkable because we have accounts of it written by both the winners and the losers in a level of detail almost unprecedented anywhere else in the 8th century BC. This is because its records have survived not just in the chronicles of Assyria, but also in the Bible. This was Sennacherib's campaign against the kingdom of Judah. The kingdom of Judah was one of the region's 2 major Hebrew kingdoms, and it centered on the powerful city of Jerusalem. It had once been part of a united kingdom of Israel, but in the face of Assyrian aggression, the kingdom had been broken up. It was now divided into the kingdom of Israel in the north, ruled by a puppet king, and Judah in the south. The Judean king at the time was a man named Hezekiah. He was an energetic ruler and seems to have been driven by religious fervor. The religion of the ancient Israelites was something of an oddity in this region at the time because it disallowed the worship of any god but the Hebrew god Yahweh. As we've seen, worship in places like Assyria was a much more eclectic affair. You might make offerings to Marduk while you were visiting Babylon on business, and make an offering to Ashur when you got home. You might make an offering to Ea if your son was going on a long voyage by boat, or to Gula if someone you knew was sick. In the Assyrian worldview, the gods of other cities were often seen as hostile, and were thought to be subordinate to the great god Ashur, but they were still thought to very much exist. In fact, the Assyrians had a habit of kidnapping the gods of their conquered enemies. Sometimes when they captured a new city, they would take the statues of its gods back to the Assyrian capital as a way of harnessing their power for themselves. But the religion of the Hebrews was different. It held that there was only one God. If you worshipped any other deity, it was believed that you were at best talking to the air, and at worst, communing with evil spirits. And King Hezekiah was one of the most strident religious rulers of ancient Judah. He enacted sweeping religious reforms, including strict instructions to worship only the Jewish god Yahweh. He removed all other statues and icons from the Temple of Jerusalem, as the Book of Kings, chapter 2:18 in the Hebrew Bible recalls.
ויהי בשנת 3 להושע בן אלה, מלך ישראל. מלאכיס תיה בן אחaz.
Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. And he did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done. He removed the high places and broke the pillars, and he broke in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made. For unto those days the children of Israel did offer to it.
היו בני ישראל מקדרים לו, ויקרא לו נחושתן.
Perhaps it was Hezekiah's religious devotion that led him to make the enormous gamble of defying the Assyrian Empire. Or perhaps the recent rebellions in Assyria had emboldened him, and he believed that it might be on the brink of collapse. Whatever his calculation, it backfired completely. He soon heard news that the Assyrian king Sennacherib was marching out to punish the kingdom of Judah with the full might of the Assyrian army. The news coming from the north would have been terrifying. Sennacherib first conquered the rebels of Ekron, and then swung his armies south to march on Jerusalem. On the road, he came across the fortified Judean city of Lachish. Lachish was the second most important of the cities of Judah. It was built on a hill about 40 kilometers to the southwest of Jerusalem and had a strong wall running all the way around it. The hill was steeper on the north side, and for defensive purposes, this is where its gate had been built. We can imagine the sight that the citizens of Lachish would have seen one day in the year 701 BC. From the north, a great cloud of dust would have begun to gather on the horizon, looking like some great natural disaster on its way. As the dust grew closer and thicker, you would have been able to hear the vibrations through the earth. If you've ever been inside a large sports stadium at full capacity, try to imagine what 3 or 4 times as many people would sound like, all marching together in their heavy armor, along with their horses and the clattering of chariot wheels and harnesses. Finally, the enormous force would have come into view, like a shadow on the land. In the center of their formations, the main body of infantry would have amassed, organized into tight, compact units, their spear points glittering in the sun. Even more terrifying would be the trundling wheels of enormous siege engines, come to tear down the walls of the city. The Judean military was insignificant in comparison. They were made up of militias and mercenaries, huddled behind the walls of Lachish that must have suddenly seemed like a pitiful defense. What happened next is depicted on a remarkable series of carvings, etched in meticulous detail in gypsum, designed to decorate the walls of Sennacherib's southwest palace in Nineveh. In their day, these carvings would have been coloured, their details picked out with dyes of green, blue, red, and yellow. The Lachish relief is an incredible piece of art, Although the events it depicts are horrific, it's a perfect snapshot of a moment in history that would otherwise be completely lost, capturing the clothes and the faces of the soldiers and the frenzied action of the battle. The Assyrians first built a camp and began to settle in for a long siege of the city, and it's here that their expertise and engineering came into play. As the weeks dragged by, they slowly built a wall of stone and earth leading up to the city's walls. It would have been a round-the-clock effort. Assyrian workers toiled to form mud bricks that made up the ramp, baking them in the sun, while soldiers shielded the workers as they built it. The occasional arrow or sling stone would sling down from the defenders on the walls. The desperation of the city's defenders can be clearly seen in the archaeological record at the site of Lachish. At some point, we can see that they ran out of iron, and in desperation began to...
Yo, Cloud9, thanks, man. Thank you, buddy. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for the ads, my man. I really am. That's hilarious, though. Like, I was laughing. I don't mean to laugh. But, man, I'm just laughing because I don't know what else to do, man. Can you hear me again now? Thanks, buddy. Thank you for telling me that. It just craps out. Just stuff on OBS, it just stops working sometimes. It's just so dumb. Man, I was laughing really hard. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you got the ads. You know what I'm laughing about? Is I know that I'm gonna be on a run. And it's gonna go into ads. It's gonna be like, I'm gonna go into the big room, I upload the disc or the tape, I'm running for the vents, and then an ad's gonna come on. I just know it. LOL. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like Moonraker. Yeah, exactly, man. I know it's gonna happen. I'm sorry. It's not funny. I don't want that to happen. I really don't. It's just I don't know what to do. Like, I didn't know it was so unwatchable. Moonraker, yo, homies. OBS is dumb, yeah. That's a good word for it. Sometimes. It's pretty epic otherwise.
As a punishment for resisting, the city of Lachish was utterly destroyed. The inhabitants of the city were ravaged.
What is this?
Faraway lands on the other side of the river Tigris. The carvings show them leaving the city in long columns.
Oh man. Oh, it's great, not gonna lie, yeah. Pretty good start. Pretty good start. Oh man. Oh my god, guys. I feel bad. I feel pressure. I feel pressure to talk to you before your ads come on. I do recommend using an ad blocker if possible. I really don't want to lose viewers to this or friends to this. You know what I mean? So the reason why I chose to do it was because I use an ad blocker and I see the big name streamers doing it, because you could see the video quality change with the ad blocker, which is okay. It goes down, but it's not the world's biggest issue. So you see when the ads are on and when they come on, but so I figured that people would do the same. So I don't really see any ads on Twitch ever. I either see a purple screen that says, "Oh, an ad is playing now," and it's blocked for like 5-10 seconds when you enter a stream, but while you're in the stream, it doesn't. It's a fucking battle, man. No.
and Hezekiah was ready for him. He'd built a new wall around the great city and dug an underground tunnel from solid stone that would bring fresh water directly into the city. But even so,
I'm sorry,
the
man.
situation must have looked bleak. The Judean king decided that he would have to negotiate.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just... I don't know what else to do in my life. I don't know what else to do. I appreciate it, guys. Poor Cloud. I'm sorry, Cloud. It's not, it's like, I don't like this feeling. It's not nice. Is Cloud9 still not here? Are you serious? I don't blame him if he wants to just not watch anymore. Sorry, man. I'm sorry, man. I'm so sorry, dude. I'm so sorry, man. I'm on Firefox, so I use all the ones on Firefox. I used to use Opera, but then the Opera one stopped working. I think it's a Chrome-based. I think it's a Chromium-based system, Opera. So now I'm using Firefox and all the ones. Which one? The thing is, I don't know which one uses it, but I'll pull up. Okay, I'll pull up the list. I'll pull up the list. Thanks, guys. And I know on mobile, I don't have any suggestions for mobile. I have no answer for mobile. But the reason why I did it is because big streamers do it, right? And I figured, like, if big streamers do that, I don't know. Like, big streamers do it, and they have friggin' tons of viewers. So I figured, well, what if I do it? Brave Google Chrome.
Their inhabitants were as the grass of the field, and as the green herb, and as the grass on the housetops, and as corn blasted before it is grown. Thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come unto this city, nor shoot an arrow there, neither shall he come before its shields, nor cast a mound against it. And it came to pass that night that the angel of the Lord went forth and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when men arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses.
We may never know the truth of what happened to bring an end to the siege of Jerusalem. The most likely explanation is probably an outbreak of plague among the army of Assyria. Plague was a constant threat to any campaigning army, and it wouldn't have been the first campaign to end in this way. One Egyptian account, repeated by the later historian Herodotus, recounts how the Assyrian army was turned back after an infestation of field mice swarmed their camp. The mice are said to have gnawed away at the Assyrian bowstrings and shield handles, making them unable to fight. And this is possibly another slightly fanciful description of a plague decimating an army. The Assyrian sources are understandably quiet about what must have been an embarrassing failure. The only source to mention this campaign focuses on the early victories won by the Assyrians.
I think I have more, guys. I think I have more than just this. Oh no, that's everything. Recommended.
Gives just one brief snapshot
That's my list right there.
The question of
That's my
what
list.
to do with Babylon was one of the
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make a
questions
GIF of this
kings,
and make it a
and it has
quote.
been a thorn in their side for centuries.
That's exactly what I'm gonna do.
Babylon was a proud and ancient city with a distinct culture, and it was so powerful that it was exceptionally difficult to keep it in the empire. Various Assyrian kings tried different approaches to this problem. Some simply allowed a native Babylonian to rule the city and the surrounding territories, which kept the Babylonian people happy. But this often led to the Babylonian king declaring independence whenever the central power of Assyria was distracted or deployed elsewhere. Others tried imposing an Assyrian governor on the Babylonians. This naturally enraged them, and these Assyrian kings of Babylon would often face plots and rebellions, and would quite often be toppled in favor of some Babylonian noble, who would then immediately declare independence. The third option was to keep the throne of Babylon in the family. This usually involved the king of Assyria crowning his brother or uncle as the king of Babylon. But this held another danger. If this brother was a little too ambitious, he might consider
Where the fuck is it?
Babylon as a springboard to try and take the whole empire for himself. By the year 694 BC, this repeated cycle and seemingly impossible problem had become too much for King Sennacherib, and for him the conflict had become personal. Babylonian rebels were partly responsible for the death of one of his sons, and after crushing his enemies in the north, in the kingdom of Judah and along the Mediterranean coast, he swung around and set out on a campaign to decisively beat the city of Babylon and solve the Babylonian problem for good. In the year 689 BC, the Assyrians laid siege to Babylon. The siege lasted for 15 months, and when the city finally fell, Sennacherib wrote this description of what happened next.
I destroyed the city and its houses, from foundation to parapet. I devastated and burned. I razed the brick and earthwork of the outer and inner wall of the city, of the temples, and of the ziggurats. And I dumped these into the Alachu Canal. I dug canals through the midst of that city. I overwhelmed it with water.
Guys, thank you so much for this discussion, because I really I don't want to lose viewers and friends. You know what I mean? Right now, it's like I also don't want to I didn't want to be a jerk and forcing people to have to pay to watch me. You know what I mean? I didn't want to do that, but I figured there's all this ad money on Twitch, and I saw the big streamers doing it, so I figured I would do it. And because I mean, that's not insignificant, right? Like $3 for a day for my channel. If I can double that, triple that, if I can make $10 a day, stream every day, be pretty sick, man. Ads or no ads? Aw, thanks, man. Push ads though for some reason. Twitch must have do. Yeah, Twitch is freaking. Have a look, see if you like Brave. Yeah.
We can imagine the scenes as a group of Assyrian legal officials gathered in court to condemn the silent stone statue of the god. Marduk was eventually found guilty, but the broken text recounting this episode gives no clue about what punishment was handed down. Sennacherib's goal had
Why
been
is this
to
such shit
utterly
quality?
destroy Babylon, and he had succeeded.
Mobile is so garbage.
Its northern provinces were folded into the Assyrian Empire, and the city itself was left in ruins.
Oh, what, with the ads? For the ads? Yeah, you should, man. You should bait it. The bait and switch. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's get back at it. Thanks, my friends. So I guess the end resolution of this discussion is that I'm still planning to keep the ads just as they are. If they're really just an issue, honestly, I know it's a weird thing to bring up, especially someone that you never met in person, but you can just, I know it's really hard to do, just to do that. But if you want to mention it as an issue, I mean, I don't know. I'm currently unemployed, right? So, yeah. If I had a job, I would probably turn the ads off. If I had a good job, I'd definitely turn the ads all minimum. If I had a good job, but time at school run. I'll be back. Thanks, buddy. Thanks, man. Thanks for being here, homie. Have fun. Have fun picking up your son. That's nice. That's cute. Joshua? His name Joshua? I'm an idiot if I got that wrong again. I just remember his writing, Joshua. Your job too is hard. Something like, yeah, it's insane. Oh, it's communism level. I enlisted in the military, dude. I joined the military. Hopefully they accept me. They might reject me. But it's fine. I'm playing GoldenEye, lifting weights. Pretty much living the dream. Just wish I paid more. I was doing Uber Eats, Joshua. No, it's a little anymore. Yeah, I know what you mean. Got a nephew and niece, 11-year-old nephew. My niece is gonna be 8. Yeah, man. And you have a... It's good you have a job for your son and for yourself. Turn 8? Holy moly. That's crazy, man. Yeah, that's old. Not old, but that's big. Big guy. Big boy. Big man. Little dude. Big dude. Little Cloud9, big guy. Joshua. He could probably write his name in friggin' calligraphy now. Or tag it like spray paint tag. Wow, I'm insane. I've already been live for 3 hours. Insane. Oh my god. Yeah, man, I was doing Uber Eats, but my car broke down. Needs new brake lines. And I thought I would be able to get a job as like a bus driver or something. I applied for bus driver. I was rejected from that. I reapplied to security guard. Struggling with his writing? No worries, man. I'm not a big writer. Writing is so archaic. I mean, it's good for history keeping and whatever, but I don't know. Trying to get him through. I hear what you're saying. Maybe he's just the next generation. He is the future. Thanks, man. Thanks, buddy. 1 hour from still here. Yeah, I probably will be. Yeah, thanks, my man. Thanks, dude. Yeah, I was a security guard before in the past. Downtown Toronto when I was buying those video games. Literally, I was a security guard when I bought Vice City. In 2006, I was a security guard at that time. I had just graduated from University of Toronto. And I was an overnight full-time security guard. Overtime. Downtown Toronto office buildings. Such a chill job. I love that job. Is giant? What? I'm not giant. Yeah. I'm only like 6'6". No, I'm joking. I'm like 6 feet. I'm 6 feet tall. I know 6 feet is still very tall, but sorry, man. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Didn't work. Sorry, man.
We know the kind of thing this oath would have contained, because we have surviving copies of this kind of treaty that Assyrian kings always sent out to their vassals. These were long legal documents running over many pages, containing an oath in which they swore their loyalty to the new crown prince, complete with terrifying heavenly punishments if they broke their word.
This is the treaty which the king of Assyria has concluded with you, in the presence of the great gods of heaven and earth. If you should remove it, consign it to the fire, throw it into the water,
Back, thanks, man. Sorry, dude.
annihilate or deface it, may Anu, king of the gods, let disease,
This is the one you got? Yes. Thank you, please. For Brave. You got it for Brave. Sick. I'll add that as a quote too. See you soon, guys. Yo, you too, man. Thanks, buddy. Thanks for being here.
roam the desert like the wild ass and the gazelle. May Shamash, the light of heaven and earth, remove your eyesight. Walk about in the darkness. May Ishtar, lady of battle in war, smash
Brave.
your bow in the
Chrome.
thick of battle. May Nod,
Cool.
bearer of the tablet of
I hear you.
of the gods, erase your name and destroy your seed from the land.
But still, the bitter former crown prince would have released
It sometimes
to accept it.
the ad blocker isn't perfect for Firefox. Sometimes it breaks. Sometimes it breaks the stream and you have to close Firefox and reopen it. It's kind of annoying. It's less annoying than ads. I'm sorry for making my stream annoying. Again, if I was working, I would just turn ads down to the bare minimum. So how do people watch the big streamers then? How do they endure it? Twitch ads are just so bad too. They're so demoralizing. They're more of a demoralization tactic than anything now in these days. It's not even about the money. Oh, that was so good. That was such a good run. It's about money. True. I was just thinking that when I said that. I'm like, yeah, it's about money. Never watch big streamers, no way. Wow. I mean, outside of our community. Not the